Roll call.
Yes, Madam President. Marty Whitmore,
Present.
Kathy Chandler Henry, Tom Alvey,
Here.
Steve Beckley,
Here.
Mike Richard, Kathleen Curry,
Here.
Stan Winery,
Here.
Steve Aquafresca,
Here.
Tom Gray, Mark Catlin, John Ely,
Here.
Doug Monger,
Doug Monger's here. He's
Sorry, here, yeah, I couldn't get my mute button, sorry.
thank you, Reby Hazard,
Here.
Taylor Hawes.
Here.
Madam President, you do have a quorum.
Great. Everyone, what I thought we would do this morning is just start in with today's agenda, and then we'll have Andy catch up on the rest of the items from the general manager's report, maybe before we do the policy discussion. So the first thing on the agenda this morning is public comment. Is there anyone from the public who has an item they'd like to raise with the board? An item that's not otherwise on the agenda, or even something that is on the agenda. Is there anyone from the public who would like to bring anything to our attention or make comments? I'm not seeing hands. Is anyone else?
Not seeing anything there, Marty. No, nothing in the chat, no hands raised, no screens have turned on from anybody.
Okay.
Not on the board.
That's fine. I like to make sure that we have an opportunity for our, for anyone who would like to talk to us. So seeing none this morning, we will move on to directors' updates and concerns. Director Aquafresca, let's start with you.
Oh, thank you. Well, what I thought I would share this morning at this time would be my meeting last week with the Mesa County Commissioners. It was my first meeting with them regarding River District affairs since we've had two new commissioners sworn into office. Of course, one of them is a returning commissioner, so she's a little bit familiar with the River District. And our very new commissioner had a great deal of interest in the River District and the difficult topics that we're grappling with here. So to cut right to the chase, where the four of us were able to develop a good solid consensus is on 4 items that they wish for me to really emphasize to the board and to our organization. And just quickly, I'll walk through those. None of these are new. You've heard me advocate for these in the past. Of course, we really wish to push for West Slope permanency for the Shoshone water right. We feel that there could be great risk there, and if we lost that risk, it would be devastating to users up and down the main stem, including us here in Mesa County. The other item was to continue to push for expansion of our state's cloud seeding program. We've made a lot of progress there with DK's leadership. We're able to do a lot more weather modification than in the past, yet we've not fully potentiated that opportunity. There's plenty of other places around the state that have been identified as being suitable for weather modification, successful weather modification, and we would be remiss not to put those into play. Let's see. The other item you've heard me go on and on about before, and that's we feel that it would be very helpful and soften the blow of a shrinking Colorado River if all 7 states were able to join together with a a phreatophyte management program from the headwaters to the Gulf of California, and really begin to get the upper hand on the undesirable invasive species up and down the river system. You know, states could really focus on the river within their own state boundaries, and states could help each other, especially where we know we have some really difficult areas where invasive species are interfering with the volume of flow in the river. And let's see, the fourth and final item is when I explained to them the harm that the lower basin's structural deficit is causing to the upper basin, they agreed with me that that really needs to be focused on, and the upper basin should not let up on that until we get some sort of resolution to the lower basin structural deficit. So those are the 4 items. Given the turn of events that is occurring in Mesa County regarding investors from New York buying up some of our most prime irrigated farmland, we all agreed that that appears to be somewhat of a pernicious development, not just for us here in Mesa County, but it will ultimately affect everyone. And I think that has really tempered enthusiasm for marching down the road to demand management until we get that resolved. And if we can't get it resolved, then it's definitely going to temper our support for demand management. So I think I have a really active set of county commissioners here, and it's critical that I include them in River District matters at all times. In future visits, I would like to bring down one of our River District staff members with each visit, so they can get acquainted with the people that actually conduct this work that we talk about. I'll report back as we go in that direction. Thanks much.
Thank you very much. Great report. Director Ely, you're next on my screen.
Well, I can't think of any homegrown issues to report to the group, although I have to say that the most interesting thing I heard yesterday was just echoed again by Director Aquafresca, and what Steve described as the influence of Wall Street on the west slope. I think that that's an interesting existential threat that will put things like construction of reservoirs and demand management and everything else to pale as it gets going. And of course, it's been going for at least 15 years. I'm not sure the interests that have been acquired in other counties in the district, the play is minimal in Pitkin. But I would suspect that anybody positioned proximate to or in striking distance to the Utah border is certainly under an incredible threat. And it was making me remember a movie I watched in the middle of the COVID stay-at-home routine that we were all in, The Big Short. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that movie. It's a great thing to watch when you're stuck at home. But it's a true story, and the investor that made billions literally off of the housing crisis in 07 and 08 is still out there investing. And at least according to the book that was written, not the movie, his primary vehicles of investment right now are agricultural land and water, which is fascinating. And so the change that presents is potentially just huge, especially as land, I assume, would just be dried up on the west slope and water would be allowed to flow into Utah, so that positions for the major metropolitan areas dependent upon the Colorado River flow could be acquired. it's an interesting future. I can relate to the group that what the county, Pickton County, has been doing for about the last 20 years is acquiring conservation easements that do not reflect true value of real estate, but in the preservation of the underlying ranch properties require the maintenance of the water right and the prohibition against alienation of the water right from the underlying real estate. And I think that we have found ourselves on a path perhaps of a solution there. And I would recommend other people consider it if you are in striking distance and your real estate values would be attracting outside of Vedsters. Anyway, it was a fascinating statement, a quick statement by Steve that got my attention, certainly. I think we're going to see a lot more from that potential threat than anything else in the future. Anyway, that's all I've got to say.
Very much. Good report. I think we all agree with you and with Director Acquafresca on that point. Director Alfie.
Good morning. So our big concerns right now is probably all of you echoing what Dave and Don said yesterday, bad drought conditions here. We're really looking at extreme shortages. As Al said yesterday, it's looking a lot like 2002. The towns that rely on water from Grand Mesa are expecting extreme shortages in their municipal supplies this year. So not only is agriculture threatened, but so are the town water supplies. So there's not much we can do about it, but it is an ongoing concern. We'll be trying to figure out how to share and spread the water the best we can. Another big concern is Senate Bill 87. I think we'll talk a little bit more about that during Zane's update, but that's the bill that affects agricultural labor. And it's a major, major concern for growers and producers here in Delta County. The impacts of increased regulation, visits from state enforcement or overseers really raise some troubling questions for how agriculture is going to survive. And it reflects and represents just an increasing disregard and misunderstanding of rural needs. I think that's been consistent over this administration and what we see in the legislature. Another issue that we're confronting on projects is that cost of pipe has skyrocketed. Projects that have been in the planning stage and that were approved and have funding lined up are finding that their funds aren't going far enough because pipe costs have in some cases doubled. I heard Steve talking before the meeting about some grape losses in Mesa County. We've had the same problem here in Delta County, but beyond grapes, it's also affecting fruit orchards. There are blocks of trees that are just dead from the late October single-digit temperatures before the trees were dormant. So that's something that our agriculture is going to have to cope with and look at replanting costs. And finally, on a little more cheery note, Paonia Reservoir outlet repair is, we hope, getting very close to winding up. It's been a 2-year project. We're right up against the deadline for needing to have gates that operate. Obviously, as we start to get inflow into the reservoir, we need to be able to release it. We've tested 3 out of the 4 gates that have passed. We have one that's still leaking. We're hopeful, though, that that'll be fixed by next week and we'll be back in operation mode. That's about the concerns here in Delta County.
Thank you very much. Good report. Director Vandenbrink.
Thank you. Well, I'm not going to touch base on stuff that I've already talked about or what I'm going to visit with you here shortly. So thank you. Rangeley has recently completed her drought contingency plan in preparation. I know they're looking at what they can also do to kind of help meet the solution of the impending water shortage that really seems to be here coming upon us. So, but that's also Rio Blanco County. We've been working very closely with Rio Blanco County and our local neighboring water conservancy districts to start developing and really come more formally together to develop a drought contingency plan for the entire county and the White River Basin that's within Rio Blanco County. Wall Street, two directors talked about that as ready. And it wasn't too long ago that I've had a conversation with some people talking about that on the White River. And we've got some awful large investors buying up. And when we start taking a drive upriver, Rangeley's on the bottom, so everything's upriver for them for a lot of this piece here. But there's a lot of different land uses happening. And we're not sure what's happening, but we do know it's compounding to some of our water shortages later on the season. But it is something we're kind of keeping an eyeball on. On the lower White River, we are continuing to progress. We're going to be having our third series of meeting to develop a rural water system because we need that drought resiliency for our rural people in our county. Because there's getting to be some problems with them even getting the quality of water has always been a problem, but the quantity of water, we've had a couple of folks here that actually weren't getting water through their diversions here for their houses because they take water right from the river. So we're moving forward with that. And what Director Albee just mentioned about project cost, yeah, all of a sudden our project of $2 million just went up by another third because of the cost of pipe. So, but that's something that we're working towards. And next week, we're going to be looking to go to the public for a little bit more official to really move this thing forward, because there's a lot of folks that are concerned about their water security as we continue to move forward. So we're seeing quite a bit more. I mean, with the downturn in our energy production in our part of the world, there is a lot of new agricultural land that was once irrigated that's now being brought back into production. Folks are having to pay their bills. And that's the reality of it. And they're buying land, but last year they started noticing that they can't necessarily fully divert their water. And I'll talk more about that here, but we are seeing quite a bit of an uptick already in new ag lands being put into production. We got push-up dams already being built into the river today. So these guys are getting ready for it. So it'll be interesting to see what happens here. And then a final piece here is we visited about the PBO for the White River. And that process has been going on now for about 20 years within the White River. And I've been dealing with this now for 6 years. And I take an awful lot of interest and pride in working with that programmatic biological opinion. I believe in the program. I believe in the process wholeheartedly. And so does our district. But we're talking about potential other delays now to where this process is getting potentially revamped, relooked at again. And instead of looking at doing a 30-year PBO, perhaps maybe a 10-year short term. There's a lot of questions to be answered again, but when we're looking at water crises for the people, I would think that's also a crisis for the fish, for the environment as well. But I'm encouraging by visiting with the recovery program staff that we can come to a resolve, but there may come a time that I know Mike Eitel has been working quite a bit with this, but we need to do something to get this thing wrapped up because frankly, it just keeps getting drug out. And you've got folks that want to participate, but the programs, I don't know if it's getting bogged down. What makes the White River so complicated? I don't know. But we're 20 years into a PBO on the White River, and we thought we had a sunset on it, but now that sunset date seems to be getting pushed back a little bit more. So for some folks that really want to see this done, it gets frustrating. So we're looking to keep communicating and getting this thing proceeded done, but at some point the River District may have to take a little bit more active role, or maybe we got to converse more about it. I don't know. But this is all recent information, and we'll be visiting more about this in the future. So I'm going to jaw jack on your ears here in a little bit, so I'll pass the gavel or the baton, excuse me.
Thank you very much. Director Hawes.
Yes, thank you, Madam President. So I have just one kind of big picture thing and then 3 quick Summit County concerns. Kind of to the point everybody else has been making around the big picture, like what's the future look like? You know, I kind of said it yesterday, but I think change is coming, and yes, there's going to be lots of different discussions and conversations around what that path looks like. My sense is everything needs to be on the table, and when it comes to demand management, I feel like related to this Wall Street issue, we're kind of at our most vulnerable now. I know Andy and Peter have heard me say this, but we have no rules, no sideboards, which is frankly, we've proven it can work, but we have no way to constrain it. And that, I think, is a really serious concern. On the other hand, on the bright side, I think there's a lot of, we're in an interesting moment in time with a new administration that is investing in infrastructure, investing in resilience. Drought is kind of our cross to bear in the West. And so let's think creatively around how we can tap into those resources, how we can tap into things that really can, create a sustainable future for this region, whether it's infrastructure or investing in our watershed, health, and other resilience measures. I think there's an interesting opportunity on the horizon, and I hope we can kind of meet that challenge or meet that moment. My 3 Summit County things. One is Summit County is in a very much a transition period when it comes to its commissioners, its water folks. I think I mentioned this briefly last time, but we have 2 new commissioners. We don't, Karn was the environmental and water person, and so Josh Blanchard will be kind of taking her role to the extent he can, but not so much a water person. Barney White retired, their longtime water counsel. So there's a lot of change, and they're looking for people to serve on the roundtable. And so I'm trying to work with Tom and the commissioners just to start to get this board up to speed and figure out how to best have them engage in these issues. The second issue is really kind of COVID related, is recreation has just skyrocketed. And Kathy Chandler Henry may have dealt with some of this as well in her county, but just the issues around stream access, river access, there's just incredible pressure on the resource just being so close to the Front Range. We're kind of the gateway. I'm sure Grand County has some of these issues too. And then the last issue is fire. People, we've already had 2 fires here in the county, and it's not even, before April 20th. And just starting, and some of them were just, one of them was, we don't know how it started. The other one was burning trash on a hay operation. And it got quickly out of control. So very, very nervous here with beetle kill. They're doing prescribed burning literally 2 or 3 sites every day right now. So anyway, I would just say this is going to be top of mind for Summit County, and especially with what I just mentioned, the recreation piece. People are coming over here, maybe not even that experienced with camping and things like that. So there's kind of this weird convergence of concern around recreation and fire.
Thank you very much for that report. Director Winery, you're next.
Yeah, thank you. This same thing you guys talk about, drought and fire, but not only the Wall Street. Hinsdale County is kind of unique, actually. We're the smallest, most remote county in the United States because Alaska is not counted as counties; they're boroughs. But if you look at it, of the Fortune 400 people that are on the 400 list, there's 14 of them that live here. And so when you talk about these outside investors, it's not only that, it's well-organized groups, whether it's, and I'm not knocking, it's whether it's Trout Unlimited, Colorado Water Trust, they all have great intentions. I think their intentions are more somewhat pure than the Benjamin Franklin angle that investors want to do. But the problem is you can't outbuy them because you don't have the money. That's really, you can't tell a farmer or a rancher he can't sell it, right? And when you make more rules and regulations, I'll never forget, we went to and I'm going to use this term kind of loosely, you'll have to forgive me up front. I was at a meeting one time and they had an environmental group wasn't allowing some stock guys to turn out. And the guy finally, it was late at night, and he finally looked at him. He said, you can either have, and he used a different word, but you can either have cow manure or you can have condominiums. You just pick which one, because I'm going to go home. He said, because if I can't turn my cows out, I'm going to sell it to that developer right over there, and he's going to make condominiums out of it. So you pick which one of those two you want. And it wasn't very long after that, Mr. Babbitt showed up in Gunnison to resolve some of these problems that they came to terms. Bruce Babbitt did. And the reason why is because he said, now they came to terms. Well, they finally realized you can only push somebody so far, and eventually that's what you're going to end up with, right? I mean, be careful when you start boxing somebody up, because when there's no more place to back up, you can't back up 1 inch more, right? And so your alternative is what? I'm going to sell it. I'm going to sell it to this New York investor who has $1 billion. And then we'll see what happens from there. So that's kind of that. You know, the same thing here. And it is extremely dry. I'm not sure that I'm believing the snow-tail sites and stuff for stuff that we've been working. There's a drain. We've been doing a project up here. This little tributary develops about 83,000 acre feet of water. It's been dry all winter, right? I've never seen it dry. And I mean, that tributary produces 83,000 acre feet of water. So it finally started running the other day. So it's going to get worse. And, but, you know, on fire's a big deal. I mean, our forest here, you know, in the Rio Grande National Forest is a big chunk of our county. It's 95% dead. It's 1.7 million acres.
Wow.
So if you know, you put that in, yeah, I'm not sure what's going to happen. So, and I agree with Mr. Director Alva, you know, the price of building materials, there's going to be a huge correctional curve here. I mean, when a 2x4 2 years ago was $3.50, today it's $9 a piece of pipe for these projects, you know, and the funding of diesel fuel. I mean, something's got to give. And what's going to happen is he who has the most is going to win. And I hate to say that, but anyhow, that's all I got for sunny Hinsdale County. So
Thank you.
that didn't sound real good, but I want you to think about the cow manure or the condominiums thing, because that's a great concept, because it doesn't matter what it's at. And I mean, they used it in a more colorful term, you can imagine, but that's the reality of where people are at. And I think if you look at the temperament of people in the COVID and in the United States as a whole, they're fixing to say it, right? And then they're going to follow through in the actions. And that's really where we're at. And I think that's, you know, I heard that yesterday between the Denver Water Board and the Northern in this argument. Eventually you're kind of tired of the fight. And so I'm tired of it. And so I'm going for broke. And that's really where it's going to come down to. And I mean, that's a polite version of it. But I think I personally am tired of backing up. There's no more backup. I'm going forward because I'm not going backwards, because there's no more place to stand. And so that's kind of where I'm at. And I think a lot of people are that way. And I see people shaking their heads here, but so anyhow. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Good report. Director Munger.
Morning. So I guess a couple things. First off, so I wanted to compliment Andy and Alyssa, the staff, and the rest with the lunch with the water. I think those things are absolutely fantastic. And so I hope you guys with the transitioning will continue to doing that. And I think, you know, it's great nighttime listening, better than watching soap opera or whatever. You can turn on the lunch with, I mean, even if we didn't make it to the live event, you know, and always enjoyed watching water and listening to water. So I hope, and I saw on Andy in your log that, you know, actually been meeting with the boards, and I'd like to invite you to come up throughout county or join us on a Zoom meeting. We're still Zooming too. So Moffat County has went into they're getting off of the remote meetings, but so I'd like to invite you, and I'd probably invite Andy Rossi as well, and we'll have kind of a joint update from the Upper Yampa. You guys saw and heard yesterday, we're joining the rest of the world into the over appropriation of the Yampa, and so I guess to inform my commissioners as well that probably don't live as much in the water world as I do and the rest, what's happened with that So, yeah, I really voiced yesterday the concern of the interim guidelines. I think that we have a huge opportunity there, and we really, and I said yesterday, we need to kind of be the leader on that, and I'm still advocating for that. And so, somehow we need to figure out how we build up reserve count there if we're still going to have these dry things, and at least have some sideboards on that whole thing. I mean, we're pushing Dust Bowl days right here around here, and I think everybody keeps crying the blues. This is much worse than 2002 in our area right now. I don't know how the heck they're coming up with 76%, because there's no way we have 76%. I mean, we've already almost hit high water, I think, and it hasn't even, it's a third full, the stream bank full is. Our basin's doing some good work on our integrated water management plan with, so it's the Yampa part and Yampa and the lower part of the Elk. We're focusing in on 3 ag infrastructure, the riparian environment, and then flows and flow shortages. So all those things will be very good for us, I think, as we're moving forward. The bad year, I mean, what we're talking about now is the stock ponds and the rest, and the potential not being able to fill up. I love those calls from the Hilton. I'm going to get my free room. So anyhow, soil, the big thing killing us is the soil moisture too, so man, and we know how bad that is. And I know as a farmer being out there, a rancher out there on the ground, I mean, it is so dry. It's like concrete out there. That ground is just so hard and dry. There's no, we're probably going to be looking at if we can find water to haul it to. So we'll be using our environmental footprint. We'll be probably hauling water to a lot of pastures this summer, as Director Vandenbrink talked about. So yeah, I'm pretty concerned about how we're moving forward. I guess we just do what we do, and we just keep moving forward and trying to figure out how we adapt to the situation. And again, I guess the big concern is that this continues to be the new normal, as what we've seen in the last 20 years. I mean, it could turn around and in next year we get floods and 13,000 CFS running by my house. It could happen there too. But anyhow, right now we're pretty dry and pretty worried. So thank you.
Thank you very much for that report. Director Curry, your turn.
Great, thank you. Good morning, everybody. When I hear the comments about the drought, I'm grateful that we live at the upper end of the basin. So even though we do have a soil moisture deficit in the Gunnison Basin, at least we're at the upper end. So we'll probably do okay, slightly less than average hay crop. Appreciate the remarks I've heard so far. And on the speculation issue, I'm looking forward to the discussion we're going to have later. So I'll hold off on my comments there. But I wanted to echo Director Aquafresca's observations about his county commissioners. We have 2 new commissioners. We have an very active board with different levels of understanding of the topics. And they have asked me to come visit with them both before and after every meeting and keep them posted on legislation. So, and they are hoping for some follow-up discussions with staff. So I need to maybe visit with Zane and see if someone could come talk to the board about some of the topics that are fuzzy. Demand management, they've heard the term, but aren't really that familiar with what we're referring to. So we would definitely need, we would be interested, I should say, in Gunnison County in having a follow-up discussion on that, and probably also on hydrology. And so, because DK is obviously a master at helping people understand what is going on big picture wise. I should also mention that because of the grant program that we're implementing, and because the counties need to ideally provide letters of support for projects, this has really brought our county into the fold. They're now very interested in what the River District's doing, because they've been asked so far to write 2 letters, and they've done that for 2 projects. And I want to express their appreciation for what the River District staffs and board support for these 2 projects in the Gunnison Basin. That has really, I think, accomplished the goal of bringing the elected officials into now they're interested in what the River District's working on. I can't say that I can predict what the hot topics are, because I get calls from the press on things that I've never read or have not really thought about that are water related. For example, the homestake release issue is the local press is doing a big piece on that. We're concerned about forest health, like Director Haas mentioned. We haven't been hit with fires yet, but all you got to do is drive into Gunnison and go over Monarch, or go over from Director Hazard's area, and you'll see all of the mortality. And we're just lucky we haven't had a major burn yet. So a lot of people are thinking about that. And then I want to wrap up just by saying that we did talk a little bit at the commissioner level about the speculation issue. And I think Director Albee's points were so spot on, that Director Winnery's, the farm economics, the ranch economics are going to drive the decision making. And these are private property transactions, but they're based in part on whether or not your business is going to work. And with some of the hurdles that folks are facing, like what Director Albee brought up with that ag workers bill, and then pressure from outside dollars driving up the cost of and the value of land, they're really challenging situations. And the River District, I think we're smack in the middle of all of this. So I'll stop there, but thank you for the chance to offer some comments, Madam President.
Thank you for the report. Okay, Director Beckley, your turn.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. As a new director, I'm still just trying to get the understanding, my feet wet to really get into the system. I do want to thank Andy for the preliminary educational program that really it was very helpful to get some education. I'm looking forward to the second one to kind of finish my education. But there's a lot. I kind of feel like I'm drinking from a fire hose. There's a lot of information, a lot of history. I've read through several books, and it's an amazing amount of history that's involved in this whole project. So I'm way looking forward to it. I'm very excited, as you can tell. The only thing that I can report from Garfield County is we do have some concerns on the municipal water supplies after the fire in Grizzly Creek. And I know that the city has reached out, City of Glenwood Springs has reached out to me to ask for some support in a grant to look at some of the rebuilding costs of the infrastructure for their intake for their domestic water. So that's all I have to report, and I'm really looking forward to meet you guys in person in July, and thanks for having me on the board.
Thank you very much. We're pleased to have you. Director Hazard, you're next.
Okay, thank you. Again, I'll just parallel a lot of the others as far as the drought. My area is also in the upper headwaters, so we won't see it as bad as Gunnison even, but it's very dry. Pictures come up on my phone from 2 years ago where we had 1.5 to 2 feet of snow in my driveway, and we haven't had that for, I don't know, quite some time, maybe 2 years. But I also work at a title company, and we've got the investors coming from all over, out of state, Front Range. They want us to do open-ended title commitments, pay at the end of the month, whatever. They just feel like they're going to roll all of the properties. And when a house in Saguache sells for $370,000, that is pretty amazing. So they're here. And that's an old house, like 100-year-old house on 3 lots. So they're definitely here. We also have 2 new commissioners. Saguache County only has a 2-term policy, so our incumbent commissioner has 1 more year, or he's finishing up his 2nd term now. The 2 new commissioners seem to be very interested in everything that's going on in the county. So again, I think it would be great for someone to come visit our commissioners when they're in the area. Saguache County on the east side of the divide is involved in 3 sub-district areas. Sub-district 5 is the one that's the closest to Saguache, and the sprinklers that are on well use are unable to use their water until their AUG plan has been approved in the state. So there's going to be a lot of alfalfa, hay, potatoes, all of that is going to be very short in the valley. We also have people that are continuing to buy these farms up for hemp. I don't know how well they're doing. Last year they had a lot of bad hemp seeds, so there was a lot of people that aren't doing the hemp now, but they were leasing these sprinkler quarters for $100,000 for a year, and with the option to buy. There's also a lot of people that are coming to Saguache. They're buying up small farms, small ranches, changing the water use to commercial and selling it by the truckloads. So we're going to have a dust bowl here also. We have a lot of people that are more people than last year even that are continuing to come in their campers, parking in the forest with the dead beetle kill. Again, they probably are new to a lot of this, so it's pretty terrifying as far as what we're looking forward to with the drier weather. So anyway, I guess just pray for rain and snow. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ruby. Commissioner Chandler Henry, not last. Not last, I'm last, but
there we go. Thank you, Madam President. And yeah, I think echo what's been said, the big concerns with drought. One of the big things on everyone's radar here, and something the community is quite concerned about and interested in, is what's going on up in the Whitney Creek area. Aurora Water got permission from the U.S. Forest Service to do some test drilling there. They are looking to expand their water diversion out of the Eagle River Valley. So that's that, of course, is a big concern. So we are keeping an eye on that. Related a little bit to the community water plan that the Eagle River Watershed Council is taking the lead on and getting closer to completion, but there's some debate about water modeling. Eagle River Water and Sand has some data and some water modeling about the Eagle River and supplies. Aurora Water does as well, and as you may be surprised to learn, they don't quite match up. So that's an area of some controversy here. On the Pitkin County side of Eagle County, we are gearing up for another season with Root Eye Water and Power, and really some huge concerns there with aquatic nuisance species. We have ramped up the funding and the hours for the boat decontamination there, and are hoping to have another successful year keeping those species out of Root Eye. We've got concerns about land use and growth, the sort of unbridled growth on the Front Range, which ties in, of course, to their thirst for water, and looking at what are clearly limited supplies on the western slope. And then the final thing I'll report ties in with what a lot of people had said, and Ruby just mentioned, the huge recreational pressure. A lot of conversations going on at the national level, National Association of Counties on Forest Health, and the recreation counties are really have a lot of concerns around fire and overuse of the resource. And I keep thinking that we need to think of tourism as an extractive industry. You know, when we had oil and gas on the public lands, there was some severance tax to help pay for the impacts. Now we have severe pressure from recreation, which is good. We want people here, but there's no way to fund those impacts. So I think more and more in my mind, the tourism industry is an extractive industry, and we need to start thinking about it that way to be able to protect our resources. So that's it for my report.
Thank you very much. I'll try and keep mine brief so that we can get back on schedule a little bit. Same thing everyone else has discussed. Around here, people have got their pipes laid out in anticipation of water, you know, being in the ditches. I've seen water, I think, in one ditch and going onto one property, but horsefly, which provides water for the Mackenzie ditch that runs through our property, is, I mean, you keep seeing the snow decreasing, and yet there's been no water in the ditch behind our house. Our neighbor's been in to, you know, clean the ditch, get everything ready. His pipes are out, and my horses haven't gotten a muddy footprint yet. So definitely drought's a huge issue here as well. We're finding the same pressures with recreation. What we have really seen in the last year is so many new people moving in. Housing prices are skyrocketing. A realtor reported that a house that she sold for like $340,000 in 2014, she just sold for $795,000. So of course that also then triggers, you know, more affordable housing issues. Affordable housing is becoming, you know, used RVs, motor coaches that people can buy and put on somebody's 40 acres or on BLM land. And so, you know, all of the same kinds of pressures and issues. I've been frustrated that, and I do want to call out both Peter and Jason for helping with our water case, as you know, for our project. It's been very frustrating to not have people understand the benefits, and to still be working on getting a proposed decree in that case over a year later, and trying to explain to various groups the benefits that everyone's going to see from this, both to ensure agricultural water so that we don't end up with the condos that Director Winery was talking about in our agricultural fields and open spaces, to a sufficient and dependable domestic supply as more people are moving in. And I'm not going to pick on any particular states, but people are moving in from states where Andy's laughing, he knows what states I'm talking about, but they're moving in from places where, you know, water isn't an issue, and it's hard for them to understand. And so, and yet they get very interested and active in community affairs, which is great, but it's just been very frustrating to have to really work so hard at explaining, you know, water that we store in a good year will be available in a year like this to release for fish flows, for agriculture, for backup for domestic municipal supplies, and that everyone can benefit. So we are trudging along with our water case, and hopefully we're going to get that proposed decree revised and back out. I think we've hopefully come to some agreements with CWCB, which hopefully will bring some of the rest of the objectors into the fold, but appreciate the district's help and support with that. It's a very important project for Ouray County. And my commissioners are also very interested in what we're doing. They're very interested in water. varying levels of expertise, but very interested. And so I think that's a great thing. I'm trying to make sure that they get all the information that the district puts out, you know, on the lunch opportunities and the weekly newsletter, so that they can hopefully become very well informed. In any event, I think that's it for Ouray County. And so now we can move forward, toss the ball back to Director Vandenbrink to talk to us about the White River Storage Project.
Thank you. I don't have access to my presentation, so while that's getting pulled up, I'll just kind of dive in to try to keep us on schedule as best as we can. So we sent a letter out here, my board president did here about 2 weeks ago, as we're getting reorganized here and getting ready to take back off here again. But the gist of it is, and we really wanted to express a huge amount of gratitude to the Colorado River District and staff for what you provided and the assistance you offered. Because truthfully, without your help, we don't believe we would be having a successful water right here. So, and it's not just the legal staff. I don't think there's a department now within the River District that I have not personally spent probably hours working with on multiple scales. And each one has brought a level of professionalism that has exceeded my expectations. And that's wonderful to see. And we certainly hope that we can continue to develop this and continue to progress forward for a much needed project. So thank you on behalf of the Rio Blanco Water Conservancy District for everything that you guys have done, but not just our district. As you'll learn here in a little bit, it's for the greater Rio Blanco County, the White River Basin, and our adjoining Rangeley, our municipality, but also the Yellow Jacket Water Conservancy District. They're all part of this process that we're doing here. So thank you very much for that. So without further ado, I'd like to jump into this thing. Next slide, please. Thank you. Briefly, we are a water conservancy district, but I want to make sure that everybody understands our mission is very similar to the Colorado River District, to conserve and develop land and water resources for the best use within water conservancy district boundaries. And with agreements that we have with our neighboring districts, they've accepted that same mission and recognize that that mission is very important to them as well. So next slide, please. And like I said, I'm going to jump right into it. And most of you are very aware of the project. This has been going on for quite some time now. To really kind of highlight some of the issues that we got here, 75% of Kenny Reservoir storage is lost. And we're losing on the average about 300 to 310 acre feet of storage a year. And when you're down to 3,400 acre feet, that percentage of loss is rather large. And so when we have a high runoff here, which won't happen this year, that percentage can be rather substantial. Another crisis piece here is Rangeley has no no water storage for drought protection. That's a real critical issue when you got a municipality. And that continues to be an economic struggle for the town. And because they've added processes, they've been through their diversion structure, through all of their distribution system. And after this year, they will have 100% all their ductile iron gone in their distribution system. And their water plant's been fully remodeled. The water storage supply is the last piece to the puzzle to give them water assurity for their municipal purposes. At present time, any future depletions in the White River or water development is going to be really, really hard due to the threatened and endangered species and the lack of water supply. With none, we already realize that with the modeling that we've done, there is no more water to be developed. And 2002, we had flows on the White River at 15 CFS. And what we kind of discussed here a little bit ago is we are below 2002 levels. So what are we going to see here? And in my time here with Rangeley, I've already seen the river get down to about 20 CFS. So I'm kind of nervous sitting on the edge of that. So loss of open water recreation at Kenny Reservoir. You've heard folks talk about increased recreation due to COVID. Last year, we had almost tripled our water users, our water recreational users at Kenny Reservoir. Recreational conflicts were real common. And with the dwindling reservoir in size, it gets really, really heated at times now. So, but we do the best what we can because there's not a lot of flat water recreation within the White River system that can be used for people's recreational purposes. Ag water unable to divert their full decreed water right and ability to sustain and develop agricultural lands. We started really talking to a lot of landowners, and they expressed in several discussions that deficit irrigation is something that's been a normal practice for these landowners, and they've not been able to divert their full water right decree for decades. So they've learned to share water between each other. With what we've got with our economics over here, as I mentioned earlier, we got more ag land being developed. The criticality of making sure that these folks can pay their bills and have a way to sustain their life and our economics down here is even more on water supply. And the river cannot sustain this all, but they're moving ahead anyway because they've got to do something here to put bread on the table. Drought conditions persist. You mentioned creeks that you talked about. We got Little Douglas Creek here. It is yet to flow this year. It's the first time in my time here. I've only been here 12 years, but I've got other ranchers that have been here for their whole life, and they're talking they've only seen this happen about 2 or 3 times, and these gentlemen are in their 70s. And we don't know if it's going to flow. My guess is it's probably not. High potential of Colorado River compact curtailment. We don't have a water right specific for that, but that adds to vulnerability to our basin for darn sure. We did a compact risk analysis. We revised that from the analysis that the River District did, and we identified 20% of the water rights in the White River Basin impacted. But more noticeably is the 45% impact within the White River Rio Blanco Water Conservancy District Basin. As I'm told from our engineer, that is the largest percentage of compact impact to any basin in the state or water conservancy district in the state. That's a real concern, real concern, because we are a very junior basin, like on the Yampa. So next slide, please. Within the White River Basin, we do have 3 reservoirs. Kenny Reservoir, which was originally 13,800 acre feet, but it is now 3,400 acre feet. Rio Blanco Lake is 1,000 acre feet, but that's mostly a recreational reservoir. There's no water release from there. Lake Avery has very similar constraints, very limited water uses, and that's 7,658 acre feet. So that's what we have for storage here in the White River. And Kenny Reservoir has the most flexibility, but Kenny Reservoir, as I'll go into a little bit more here, is run of the river, with its main purpose being recreation, flood control, and hydropower. Those are its 3 primary purposes. So there's not a lot of storage, even at 3,400 acre feet, that could be really used for a whole lot of beneficial purposes that really hamstrings the community. So next slide, please. So what have we done to date to address the crisis? In 2013, we completed planning studies and stakeholder outreach. Within that, we identified 2 very economical water storage locations. We've also obtained a decree for 66,720 acre feet of storage after negotiating that with the state of Colorado. We've provided a solution to a pending water crisis in the White River. That's important to understand that the water solution isn't just for the lower White River, but also for the upper White River. Whether water's stored where it's at in this specific instance for our reservoir, it also provides significant benefits for water users above that reservoir as well. This project will avoid and minimize adverse environmental consequences. And I'll go into that a little bit more. We've got a river here that is getting dramatically low. And what sort of adverse effects are we going to see upon our environmental here that Tom Chart talked about yesterday, even with our endangered species? So minimal impacts to private landowners. My board went out of their way to make sure that they did not impact private landowners. Right now, and I'll go into that a little bit here again, their primary alternative is the off-channel reservoir, so it'd be a pump project. But there's only one private landowner, and that's us. We own 160 acres. The other portion is state trust land, and the rest is BLM. That's intentional. is we wanted to protect lands of significant value, being the agricultural piece that we have there, from the inundation of any sort of water body, but add value to the county rather than take away any value. There was quite a bit of pride in that and long discussions to make sure with that. So providing environmental enhancements. We really want to do a whole lot more environmental enhancements, whether it's riparian or in-channel, whatever. But it's tough to do when you don't have a water supply. We're trying to meet domestic and human needs, industrial needs, agricultural needs, but it's hard to do anything for the environment when you don't have the water available to do it. So this will really provide an opportunity for that. Ongoing or develop recreation and economic benefits to Northwest Colorado. I can't express enough on how much the downturn to the economic trend has happened here in the past 12 years since I came here. The sequestration of energy and natural and that natural resource, extractive natural resource, has been huge. And within our district, I mean, we've seen significant decreases in property valuations, severance tax coming back around. I mean, we all kind of are aware of how that's impacted our budget on the River District. Support and promote Rio Blanco County and White River Basin agriculture through augmentation. We've got a lot of additional agricultural lands that we've identified within the White River Basin as part of this analysis as well. Presently, there's about 27 to 28,000 acres of land that meets of high, I'm trying to find the term for it, high ag suitability indexed via USDA NRCS. We have 28,000 acres of that being used today. But in the White River Basin, we've identified that there's over 90,000 acres of that agricultural land. Of that land, not all do have water rights to it, but with the switch to agriculture happening right now within our basin, these junior rights that are having a hard time diverting water, but also these newer rights that will come about to develop these lands, they're going to need a source of water to help promote that agricultural land to come back in production. We've also entered into intergovernmental agreements with Rio Blanco County, the town of Rangeley, and Yellow Jacket Water Conservancy District. This is truly turning into a vast community project. And we are working very closely on behalf of all these entities here. So it stretches, I got a map there that shows all of Yellow Jacket, Rio Blanco County and the White River Basin, and also the Water Conservancy. Thank you very much. So that's pretty well the area that we're looking at. And even the Piance Basin area, I don't have my cursor over that, Piance Creek, that's within the White River drainage within Rio Blanco County. That's covered within that intergovernmental agreement that we have with Rio Blanco County to provide augmentation supplies for them as well. We can do that. There's water to be developed, but it's hard to develop it when you're looking at, you got to let it go downriver to your other water users. Excuse me. So can we return to the previous slide? Thank you. I'm done with that one. Can we go to the next slide? So the solution that my board has come up with, and in 2018, the directors unanimously approved the alternative. Their primary alternative is the Wolf Creek Dam with the pump station. That'd be the dark blue over there. The dark blue within the picture is the off-channel site. The lighter, the grayish blue area is the White River. Really, if you dam up the White River, the footprint is nearly the same. It's a natural depression and the water would flow back into that area anyway. So, but again, that's all land of high value that we want to respect those private landowners' rights and not develop on that. So, but when we also look at constructing a reservoir, I know we're looking at a $150 million project. You're looking at a project that's very cost effective, and it's hard to say that when you're looking at that many figures, but at $2,100 per acre foot to construct, that's pretty efficient, especially when you're looking at front range projects and other comparable projects of being $45,000+ per acre foot to construct for virtually the same amount of volume of water. So when it comes to breaking that down for augmentation purposes, to develop an augmentation plan or for our county, for irrigation, for whatever the ag wants to use, that cost will be reflected, and it makes the water very efficient and cost effective for people to utilize that water for the benefit of our part of the world. Next slide, please. Really, we're at a point after seeing what we're seeing here with repeated drought conditions continuing to get worse. No action is not an option. and my board and our constituents are very firm in that. We don't have storage to meet current water needs during drought conditions, nor meet the needs of the water that could be used right now, the water rights that are out there, and reliably provide water for future needs. We don't have that ability. We have opportunities, but yet the opportunities are passing us by to expand upon our economy, our customs and cultures, our way of life. But we can't do that because we don't have the necessarily water. Kenny Reservoir is a run of the river. And I'm not going to dive into that much, but that reservoir continues to shrink. Avery and Rio Blanco again, it's not available for water supply, very limited uses. White River constituents are currently, and I want to emphasize this, we're currently facing an imminent municipal, agricultural, environmental, and economic catastrophe due to the lack of storage for a resilient water supply. That is very real. When you got a community here that's doing a drought plan, but their drought contingency plan includes having a contract with the tanking company to start lining up semi trucks down the road from Fruta, from Vernal, wherever the case may be, to have semi trucks tank water here if that river goes dry. That's very real. And if we have where municipalities can't have water, what's that do to the agriculture? What's that do to the environment? And I want to talk about the environment a little bit here, if I could, please, is if we don't have enough water for the people, how's there going to be enough water for the endangered fish? And all the dollars and time and expenditures that you're aware of that the recovery program has invested, that could potentially be at risk to go away. And all that investment could be gone. We're here to protect that. And that's a goal. And we've got an opportunity here in Rio Blanco County and within the White River system to make an asserted effect to protect that environmental system. And that is a very conscious effort of that board of directors that I work with and the people of the White River. They recognize that value. Continued diminishing of recreational benefits at Kenny Reservoir. Tax revenue from the project will not be available. And in an area that's seen incredible economic hardships, this is even more and more important, and emphasizing that people are looking for ways to put bread on their table and pay their bills. It's very hard. Agricultural development, present and future, will continue to be repressed throughout the basin. Sorry, there's a typo there. Without storage in the basin. It's imperative to have this done. Next slide, please. So in June 27, we talked about that decree of 66,720 acre feet. The decreed uses is municipal, which is critical for the town of Rangeley. Augmentation, that is so broad in what it does, providing flexibility for water users, including agriculture in our basin. But we are also looking at developing, as you heard on the Yampa River being over appropriated, that has been discussed here on the White River as well. We're just not there yet. But our intent is to develop a blanket augmentation plan for the water users within the White River Basin. Mitigation of environmental impacts, including endangered fish recovery program. That water right includes that ability. Hydropower generation, recreation, piscatorial, and wildlife habitat. It gives us the flexibility. We got a lot of water rights within the White River, except they're extremely junior. But we've also got a lot of water rights that can't be developed because the water just simply isn't there. Hence the big piece of augmentation that's part of that. So we're very fortunate. We're very happy that we were able to negotiate a settlement with the state to get this water right so that we can move forward with our next step. Next slide, please. Substantial project support, and that includes the River District. And there's letters of support, financial, there's staff time that has been given to us from other organizations, but this is just a portion of the list that we thought we'd share with you. Within the White River Integrated Water Management Plan, the White River, I don't think that's quite the right acronym for it. So the White River Water Initiative, I believe, it was called out as a specific project, and and also within the Douglas Creek Conservation Districts, they're grateful for the work being done, because without it, they know that we're going to have ag continue to struggle within the White River Basin. So next slide, please. So our work plan, we do have a grant right now that we were still working with the CWCB. We call it the pre-permitting because we were using this to get us set up to go into the permitting. So continued management and facilitation. We're kind of here talking with you today. That's part of what this is about. coordination with the programmatic biological opinion. And we're planned to be completed next year, but as I learned this week and late last week, that might be moved down the road a little bit. But that's a task that we've been given to work with the state conjunctively to coordinate this effort. Develop of a one record of decision permitting work plan. That goes to a streamlined permitting process. We're learning that. But they want us to kind of give them a report on how they can do that with other projects in the state. So the state of Colorado has given us that opportunity. And we've worked very well and very closely with BLM and the state to define and how to organize that to give us that one record of decision. Preliminary recreation plan, that's mostly complete. It still needs some final tweaking, but it's in draft, but it's mostly complete. Purpose and need refinement. The water right has been attained, and that's a huge part of the purpose and need refinement and strengthening. Financial report, that's a big piece, and it's evolving. Conversations are happening. Things are moving forward because the risk to water shortages are getting very real. So, and our partnerships are helping develop that financial support. And then a final report. We're looking at having this wrapped up by the full final report by probably mid of next year, roughly. So draft, it's hard to say. Hopefully all these processes keep moving forward. So the PBO is the one that right now is kind of a long shot for us. We're hoping to keep moving forward with that. So next slide. The permitting process, pre-permitting phase. So we've developed key role agencies and requirements. That's a long list. Holy cow, I've never done NEPA. That's an eye opener. Wow, is that going to be a learning experience? And there is a lot of moving parts to that thing. Lots of questions. No required permits and clearances required, and associated data needs. Again, that ties right into number one. We're going to stack up some paper on this one, folks. Determine key impact resources. We've already identified them from a high level, but we're going to take a closer look. EIS alternatives and an EIS schedule and work plan. But the goal is to make the permitting process more efficient. And our goal is to have a defensible permit in the end. And that's the goal of the permitting agency as well. So next slide. I think that's it. Nope. And this is our community. And this is something that I keep getting reiterated. That people are reiterating to us as the Water Conservancy District and our county fathers as well. We will continue to work towards a solution to this water crisis in our community. And the community is not just Rio Blanco Water Conservancy District. I want to reiterate, it's much larger than that. Work to understand our project's adverse consequences, enhancements, and benefits to our neighbors, the environment, and people of Northwest Colorado. And that's very real because the project is 50% in Moffett County. So, and there's a large drainage of that goes on up to Dinosaur National Monument. So there's things to be looked at over there. And there's benefits not just to one county, but across county lines as well. So, and as we continue to move forward, we will engage the River District. I don't know to what extent that we'll be seeking additional assistance, but we know there's going to be an ask coming at some point. We're just still trying to determine that yet. And we'll be meeting no more here as our project team gets regrouped here in the next couple of weeks. And we're going to start hitting the grindstone again and getting this thing moved up to the next step. So we do greatly appreciate all the continued assistance from the River District. And we look forward to really moving forward in that partnership, but working to keep Colorado water within Colorado, but also West Slope water. There's a bigger picture to that as well. But our premise is to take care of our local needs. But if there's other ancillary areas there that helps us do something for the benefit of a larger group, then we want to do that as well. So I believe that's the last slide.
Really nice presentation, Director Vanden Brink, and very exciting to see that moving forward. Before we move into the annual policy decision, and so here's kind of the lineup for the rest of the morning. We're going to next take up annual policy discussion. Then we will finish up the general manager's items. We'll do external affairs, project operations, and so on. As you can tell, we are behind schedule. We have important things on the agenda the rest of the morning. I don't want us giving short shrift to anything at all. But do keep in mind that, you know, we are running behind schedule. So it would be nice if we could finish up by 11 or 11:30. However, I think we also need a 5-minute break right now. So we're going to do a quick 5-minute break. Please be back at, you know, like 5 of. Okay, and we'll start up again at 5 of. Thanks.
Thank you all.
To our policy discussions. Is that Zane?
That
It
is me.
is. Yeah.
Perfect.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Included in your board packet, you have a handful of policies that are up for annual review by the board. I'm just pulling my packet up here. Altogether, we have 5 policies eligible for final action. Agricultural water use, CRISPA, Colorado's prior appropriation doctrine, federal water rights, and the Upper Colorado River Recovery Program, which I noted in my memo to you, that staff is recommending not taking final action on that today in order to solicit additional input from the board following Tom Chart's presentation to the board yesterday, as well as the fact that this really is a moving target right now. We've seen a state proposal for the recovery program. The water users are developing their proposal, and there's an ongoing effort to reach a consensus on that, on what a future program might look like. So if it's okay with you, Madam Chair, why don't we start with the low-hanging fruit, and it's those top 4. And I'm sorry, I forgot to mention that we do have a policy in front of you today that we would like to have your feedback on. Per feedback we received from the board at last quarterly meeting, we've developed anti-speculation, or a policy related to water speculation in Colorado. So I still think the 4 low-hanging fruit are those first 4 bulleted items in the memo.
Perfect.
Do you want to take it from there, and I can take
Yes.
notes, or okay?
Yes, and just for the benefit of new directors and members of the public, our policy statements are things that we have several. We rotate to make sure every couple of years to make sure they're still pertinent and up to date, and revised with according to changes that we want to make. However, we always look at a policy twice. We never formally adopt a policy on the first go round. It always comes up at least twice, sometimes more, but at least twice. So agricultural water use is the first one. Zane, can you share screen, and so everybody's got that in front of them, or?
I can, unless Lori would like to. I think Lori will need to add me as a co-host. It might be easier for one of the existing co-hosts just to share this section of the board packet. But I can also share if somebody will grant me the privilege.
Well, does everybody have it in front of them? Okay.
Yes.
Because this one, has some minor revisions to it, I'm going to just ask for a motion first so that we tee it up, and then if we need to make amendments, we'll do that. Okay?
Great.
So would someone like to make a motion on this policy?
I'll make a motion, Vandenbrink.
Move to approve, I assume?
Yes.
All right, and is there a second?
Hazard second.
Okay, and so then there are proposed revisions. Let's look at those proposed revisions. And
As the board will
those-
remember, this revision was suggested by a couple of board members last board meeting to more actively state out our position with regards to the sanctity or the utility of pre-Colorado River compact water rights.
Okay. Is everyone okay with that revision? I think we made that as a group. Any other? Yeah.
Madam Chair?
Sure. Director Hawes.
Thank you. I'm just curious. I mean, they're kind of flip sides of the same coin. So we struck supports and added oppose. Wouldn't we want to be doing both? Like there'd be an element of support when it's legislation protecting and opposing. So I'm just curious why it's become an either or rather than some kind of blending of both.
Zane, I would have to go back and kind of look at the minutes, but I think that we were concerned. I think we were really concerned about the fact that so many of the agricultural water rights are pre-compact, that we didn't want, for instance, the abandonment process to include pre-compact water rights.
I guess I would chime in to say that having gone back and reviewed the minutes and the recording of our last quarterly meeting, the instruction and the recommendation from, I think it originally came from Director Gray, but was agreed to by a small handful of other board members, was to rework that into more of an oppose language. And I believe what's in front of you is consistent with the direction we received from the board during that meeting. Staff is of course happy to, if the board suggests, go back and try to strike some sort of more balanced tone. But that's at the board's discretion.
Do you have a specific revision you'd like to propose, Director Hawes?
I probably can't do it on the fly, but I feel like what we would be hoping for is, on one hand, supporting legislation that protects pre-Colorado River compacts and opposing legislation that erodes them. So I could do something after we get off the phone, but that then delays this. But I saw Director Curry may have a solution.
Okay, Director Curry.
Thank you, Madam President. So I think if you're silent on the supports language, if you have the deletion there and you have that oppose language, I think it would infer that the River District could support legislation that provides protection, but it would just be an inference. I actually had a question for Zane or somebody. What do you mean by erode the utility? Can you give me an example of what that means? Is it, I think, Director Whitmore, you mentioned the abandonment statute. Was that what we were thinking about primarily?
Well, I think that was one of the concerns when we looked at this, was that we were trying to ensure that 2020 was the abandonment list, 2021 is objections to the abandonment list. And we were trying to, I think, make a statement that we didn't want to see pre-compact water rights, especially agricultural water rights, on the abandonment list.
Okay, so that's an example. Okay.
Once again, because we are sharing, I'm having a little bit of trouble figuring out who's got their hands up. So if I'm not seeing somebody, just please speak up. There we go. Yes, Director Acquafresca.
Thank you. Well, another word that may capture what we're trying to say here would be to refer to the integrity of pre-compact water rights. You could say the utility and integrity, or just substitute integrity for utility. Integrity might be all more encompassing.
All right, is that a motion to amend?
I will make that motion, yes.
Okay, motion to amend the proposed language by striking the word utility and insert the word integrity.
Well, I'm sorry. Could we insert the word integrity and maintain utility as well?
Absolutely. Will the mover, Director Vandenbrink, accept that revision?
Absolutely.
And will the second accept the revision?
Yes.
All right. Any other revisions that anyone wants to make to?
Well, does
I'm
there
sorry?
need to be a
Yes.
second? My motion.
Yes, you're right. Does it, is there a second for that amendment? To change, to add the word integrity? I'm not hearing a second.
Second.
Okay, Director Ely seconds. Any further discussion on that amendment? All those in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed? Opposed, nay. Okay. Director Hawes, do you have any other amendment that you would like to propose?
Well, I think before I propose anything, I would love to hear from staff. Is that helpful to add, you know, the flexibility for support and oppose, or are you good? Do you have what you need? I mean, it's really up. It's the point of these documents is guidance to staff. So I'd love to hear from staff.
Well, let me just speak up. I think that the prior, I think that the language as it's proposed to currently with Director Aquafresca's amendment, while it may be spoken in the negative in terms of opposition, it infers the support, and we're fine as staff. We understand that it will also be supporting efforts to protect pre-compact Colorado water rights. So I think it works from a staff perspective, but this is a board policy, so we clearly defer to the board on that.
Anyone else?
Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead, Director Hawes.
Well, I think if staff has what they need and we're all clear on what it means, that there is that inference, then I don't see a need to change it unless others think it would provide clarity down the road.
Director Curry.
Thank you so much. I think Director Haas is onto something, because if Zane goes down to the Capitol and has that direction, or when Zane goes down to the Capitol and has that direction to support those kinds of efforts, legislative or administrative efforts, wouldn't that give him more direction from us to actually get out there and support something as opposed to sit back? Is that what you're after, Director Haas? Just giving more direction then to be more proactive if a bill came forward or there was a conversation about it?
Yes, exactly. I mean, this to me, when I read it, it's very clearly talking about opposing certain legislation, which isn't always going to be what's on the table. Often there will be legislation to potentially protect pre-compact water rights. So I just think that if it were me in staff's position, I would just want a little bit more clarity that it's both supporting protective legislation and opposing a legislation that erodes that.
If I can make a suggestion, then I think that what we could do, Zane, if you could quit typing, please.
Yep.
Support. I think you could delete the deletion on supports the first sentence. Leave it there. Put an and, so that it reads in its entirety. Supports legislative and administrative actions protecting pre-Colorado River compact water rights and opposes any legislative or administrative actions that erode the integrity and utility of pre-Colorado water compact rights. So it covers it all. If that works for the board, it would, I think, Madam President, need an amendment by the
Yep. Do I have a motion to amend as proposed by our general manager?
Beckley makes a motion to amend.
Okay, and is there a second?
Second.
Director Hawes seconds. And does the original Director Vanden Brink?
Yep,
Are
I'm
you
good.
agreeable? Okay.
Yes,
And the
Madam
second,
Chair.
perfect. Then all those in favor of that amendment to change the language as we now see it on the screen, signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed, nay. Okay, are there any other amendments that need to be made to this policy? Anyone have anything else they want to propose? Okay, then we will take the underlying motion, which was to approve the policy as it now has been amended. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Those opposed, nay. All right, so that takes care of agricultural water use. And that is our second reading on that one, so that actually becomes policy, I believe. Am I correct on that?
Yes, Madam President.
Thank you. Okay, Colorado River Storage Project Act. Is the next one.
Same.
Yep. Sorry.
And we have only one proposed change in that, to add the word congressional. To that end, the Colorado River District supports the full use of power revenues generated by the initial units together with congressional appropriations as needed. That's the only proposed change. Is there a motion on this policy?
So Alvy moved to support this
Perfect.
policy statement.
Okay, we move motion to adopt. Is there a second?
Second, Aquafresca.
Thank you, Director Aquafresca. Director Alvey, did you want to comment on this? Are there any other revisions or any
Nope.
discussion on this? Okay,
I'm good with it as it stands.
all right. Is there any other discussion? Director Monger?
Yeah, so I apologize. Again, I don't have a problem with the way the thing's written right now, but I guess, my basin and Al's basin were left out of this whole thing during the Yampa and during these crisp discussions. And again, I think, especially now as we're running into drought and the rest, I think, I'm supportive of having some expansion of the crisp system and potentially having some in funding. And Andy talked about it yesterday. We're working on having some stuff happening out of the Little Snake and, having some federal money come help us build some little ponds. And so, whether they're 11,000 acre beaver ponds or whatever, but I think, we would, I think there's a lot of need out there, and especially in the lower basin. And I've been advocating for it all along, and having high mountain reservoirs versus having Lake Powell and Lake Mead, where the evaporative loss is, so high. And then the cross benefit that would do for our areas is part of that as well. So I'm fine with and we don't need to deal with it right now, but I think the thing needs to be expanded. And that we need to start going back after some of this infrastructure money and maybe this isn't the place. Thank you very much, Madam Chair, for the time.
Director Monger, I totally agree with you. Ouray County has an authorized but unfunded CRISP reservoir that we are trying to get funded, but I totally agree. There are many other projects out there that we need to be finding ways to pursue. My suggestion would be this, if the group is amenable. I would suggest that we direct staff, having heard Director Monger's comments, to try and draft a new policy for consideration at the July meeting that would just address infrastructure, funding of infrastructure beyond CRISP, and supporting additional infrastructure funding beyond CRISP. Does that seem like Director Alvey?
I believe we have a policy on infrastructure. I'm not sure that it addresses funding in the manner you and Director Monger are talking about, and it clearly should. But I think we may just be able to fold that into an existing policy.
Let's direct staff, if it would be acceptable to the rest of the board, let's direct staff to please look at that If it's a matter of amending the infrastructure policy, fine. If it's a matter of drafting a new one, that's fine too. Andy?
Yeah, if I may, Madam President, I think what I guess I'd like to throw out there is that, on the heels of 7A and the overwhelming support we got for funding projects across the entire spectrum of water use, that I would encourage the board to direct staff to evaluate our infrastructure and other policies to make sure that our policies reflect the support we saw at 7A. In other words, that multi-use perspective that really is successful from our voters' perspective, from society's perspective today, and make sure that our policies actually reflect those priorities that were developed in that question and addressed. And not to diminish infrastructure or storage at all, but I think what we heard pretty loudly and clearly from voters is that those need to go hand in hand with healthy river enhancements and watershed health and productive agriculture enhancements. And if we focus solely on one of those, we oftentimes are not successful because we alienate so many others. And so if we can try to present a balanced approach in our policies, I think it would help staff and perhaps the district maintain the success that we saw in 7A.
And I think that's a great point. I think that truly is the sense of the comments. So
Okay.
Staff, Mr. Mueller, please consider yourself directed to come back with some recommendations if in July, whether that's a new policy amended or just, a series of this is what we need to do. And if we can't get it all done in July, we'll work on it in October as well. Director Chandler Henry.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment that I think this is a critical policy to be really clear on, as if infrastructure money becomes available at the federal level, if the state directs money to infrastructure, if we have a clear policy that says, and Andy, I like your idea of making sure it's part of a balanced package, but if we have something on hand we can point to that tees us up for getting whatever funds may be available, I think that's a good approach.
Okay. Anyone else who has a hand raised that I'm not seeing? Okay, then we have a motion to approve the Colorado River Storage Project Act policy with the one minor amendment. It's been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? If not, those in favor say aye.
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 And any opposed, nay. Perfect. All right, now we are on to the prior appropriation doctrine policy.
Second, trying to bring that up for you.
And again, I'm just looking at this. It doesn't appear that there were any revisions to that at all, except to, they're sort of clerical, to add an AL so that it's in-stream flow and recreational in channel values rather than just recreation. And it's grammatical and clerical. And down a little bit further, notable among, and we've struck the word recent adaptations because none of those are really recent. They've been with us now for a while.
Madam Chair, this is Monger. I move that we approve as presented, move things along.
Is there a second?
Second, Chandler Henry.
Great. Is there any further discussion on this one?
Yes, Madam
Yes,
Chairman.
Director Alvey.
Just a pet peeve, and that is the first paragraph uses equitable or equitably 3 times in one sentence or 1.5. Equitable is a term which is undefined in my view, and we see it over and over, particularly in demand management discussions, nobody knows what it means. So I'm not proposing that we don't approve this. I think it's fine. As I say, it's a pet peeve. We need to maybe think of some other language as we go forward.
I appreciate that comment, Director Alvey, because yes, it has become a difficult word. It has changed contexts in the water world. Would you like to move to strike any of those? No. All right. Anyone else with comments? If not, all those in favor of adopting the prior appropriation policy as proposed, signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. All right. That brings us to federal water rights. And I don't think there were revisions to this one
There were not, Madam Chair.
at all. Is there a motion to approve, to re-adopt this policy as
Hazard
presented?
summary.
Moved by Director Hawes. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Director Ely. Is there any discussion on this one? All those in favor of re-adopting the federal water rights policy, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Nay. Great. That brings us to the Upper Colorado River Recovery Program that we're probably not going to take action on today at recommendation of staff unless someone feels strongly that you want to address it today. Otherwise, we can look at revisions, provide some additional guidance if anyone has some thoughts, and we will take it up again in July, perhaps.
And Madam Chair, if I may, we
Yeah.
welcome feedback from the board on specific items that were discussed with Tom Chart. If there is anything that the board specifically noted from that conversation that is either missing or needs to be added here, I think we would welcome that input now. Otherwise, staff can go back and look at the state's proposal and some of the other things that have become available in the last week and will be becoming more available in the coming weeks to try and outline specific funding, legislative and regulatory needs related to the program.
Perfect. Yes, Director Curry.
Thank you very much. Just by way of feedback, the slideshow or the presentation we had yesterday from Tom Chart was so valuable. And I think at the very end, he pointed out the differences in funding expectations between the Bureau and the state of Colorado. And I feel like our policy does touch on this pretty well, but I want to point out that if the burden of operating the screens and ladders falls back on the water users, it would come as a major budgetary impact for the entities that had to put those screens in and are operating those, but are being reimbursed. It's a significant budget issue for them if those costs were to fall back on the water users that had to install those facilities and the ladders. So I just want to make sure that we didn't miss the fact that there were two budget estimates with different calculations for how much hydropower revenue would be going towards the program. And I'm happy that we're not going to vote on it today, Madam President, but I think yesterday's presentation was really spot on and highlighted the difference in funding that we might be able to expect for this program and how that would impact our individual water users if the funding isn't there.
Thank you for those comments. Director Vanden Brink.
I just have one for consideration. And that would be to include suggested of adding something about maybe in the first bullet point of without injury to existing water uses. That seems to be missing in here, but that is something that I think should be considered as part of our policy.
Okay. Zane, did you get that one?
I did. I've got it here.
Thank
And
you for,
I will actually, Zane, I will actually have more that we want to kind of help shore up the recovery program as well. That I'll be coming up with more comments, and I will communicate those directly to you as well.
great.
Okay.
And so funding, I think Director
Yes.
Curry is right on. That's an issue. Protecting existing water rights. We've provided that. Does anyone else have something that they'd like to suggest? Director Hawes and then Director Monger.
Thank you. And I just want more of a clarification. So the other big issue facing the recovery program is that combination of funding, and I recognize that that is a evolving issue right now, but I don't know if perhaps we could
Not right now.
include
Hang on.
something that would cover funding at that federal level, advocating for continued federal funding. And I don't know if that gets at Director Curry's issue or if that was more of a state issue. So I don't know if Director Curry wants to clarify, but I would like to see something in there, if all the parties can agree, that we would be supportive and advocating for that continued funding to ensure the program can continue.
Director Hawes, I don't want to speak for Director Curry, but I think you're correct. And the concern is that if there isn't sufficient federal funding, then the costs, if they fell to the water users, it would be a burden. So
Great.
that's the
Thank you.
sense that I think we're asking the staff to capture.
Wonderful.
Anyone else? Okay, we're not going to vote on this. Oh, Director Monger, sorry, my
I
apologies.
apologize. So I just quickly would like to reflect the presentation that we had from T. Wright as well as Representative Utah. So anyhow, I mean, so that, there's unburdened or, so that somehow that we reflect, we try to minimize the conflicts between, the private in that section right there that gets the water dumped into. I mean, I would be pretty upset if you guys somebody put a flash flood on my place every year and it washed out 10 foot of bank every other year. So I would be pretty concerning. So we have values, we all have values, and some of those values need to be appreciated on both sides. So I don't know that T. Wright's asking for a lot. I just think that those things need to be recognized as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Director Monger. Anyone else?
Madam Chair, if I may, would just chime in to highlight that within the state's proposal, and something that the water users have been discussing within the last week really, is trying to identify ways not only to make up for through congressional appropriations, the loss of hydropower revenue, which will be meaningful, but the expanded scope of the recovery program and some specific ways to use those congressional appropriations to directly fund state field level staff, including creating a capital construction fund. There are a few specifics that are going to be key components of any consensus that's reached between water users, state, and other participants. I guess I'm asking for clarification from the board whether you want to dive that deep into specifics or find ways to overarchingly point to expansion of the program, need for congressional appropriations, and so on and so forth.
Anyone have a thought on that? Yeah, Director Hawes.
Yes, I think at this point, saying it would be fine to kind of have those overarching concepts. I think there's too much fluidity in the conversation right now to know what the details are going to be. So I would aim for those higher level principles.
Okay, thank you.
Concepts.
Okay. Anyone else? All right, we're just going to pass this one back to you, Zane, and move on to water speculation.
That should be in front of you. Can you see it?
Yes.
Okay.
And hopefully everybody had a chance to review and consider this Yes, Director Aquafresca.
Thank you. You know, all in all, for taking a first cut at it, I think that Zane did a pretty fair job on this proposal. I had a couple of wordsmithing suggestions, and my first one would start on that top line where it says, the River District opposes speculation in Colorado's water resources, comma, particularly where, well, I would suggest dropping the comma and the word particularly, so it flows better, no pun intended. So it would read, the River District opposes speculation in Colorado's water resources where an interest in water is pursued primarily, so on and so on. That would be one change. Let's see if I can identify the others.
Zane, you just need to enable your editing to make.
Thank you. And I guess I have a question. Would you like me to track these changes now, or do we need a motion?
Because we're not adopting it today, I think, right? Because this is our first review of it. I think what we'll do is just give you suggested revisions, and then we may just have a motion at the end to bring it back for second review.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair.
And I apologize, I cannot relocate that second suggestion I had. Perhaps as we discuss it, I'll find that one again.
Okay, others with suggestions for revisions? Looks like everybody's thinking that you did a good job. Yes,
No.
Director Curry.
Thank you, Madam President. You probably couldn't see my hand up because of the sharing, so I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, that's fine.
So I appreciate the spirit behind this, but I wanted to raise a couple of issues and then offer a specific recommendation. The River District, in my view, represents water right owners as well as potential buyers. And I think this is really a sensitive topic because of the private property right aspect of the conversation. And the fact that the River District does include a lot, there are a lot of water right owners, private property right owners within the geographical spread of the district. So I wanted to see what people thought about acknowledging the rights of water right owners to engage in a private transaction. And what I'm getting at there is, if you are a water right owner and you want to sell your property and your water rights, right now, there is no external review of that per se, unless there's a change proposed, and then that triggers the water court process, as I understand it. So to give you an example, if our neighbors wanted to stop irrigating, didn't want to be in the business of ranching anymore because their kids weren't interested, and say they offered their ground to us, and we wanted to purchase that, how we figure out whether or not the buyer is a speculator is kind of the crux of the matter here. And in fact, if we purchase that, we would be purchasing it for profit, by the way, Director Aquafresca. You know, our theory would be that that ground and that water would increase our business potential as a entity that engaged in ag production. So, you know, we get into these really touchy issues, but I thought maybe what we could do is include a bullet that says that the River District acknowledges the rights of water right holders to engage in private property transactions, and not putting a judgment on that, but just acknowledging that those people exist out there.
Okay, that's a very good suggestion.
I'm sorry.
That's a great suggestion to add a specific bullet. And I think Zane has hopefully captured that. Let me just point out after where it says particularly where an interest in water is pursued primarily to secure a financial profit and where the purported speculator does not have a specific plan to put water to beneficial use.
Right.
For legitimate beneficial purposes. I think that addresses the example you were giving, but I think let's ask staff to add a bullet.
And can I add another thought,
Sure, of
Madam
course.
President? So, and maybe it's not appropriate as a bullet, but I just wanted to point out that a seller has no control over what the buyer is going to do with that water. And we have examples in our drainage, and this was kind of alluded to earlier in your remarks, Director Whitmore, Madam President, when you were talking about the buyers in your basin and elsewhere. We have folks on both sides of us actually that are from out of state that purchased the ground, and then they hired ranch managers and they kept it in production. But they weren't really speculators. So, and they kept it in ag, but you're right, they could change that anytime, and decide they didn't want to do that anymore. In fact, the owner of the Texas Rangers is our neighbor, and he's decided to sell, and that's 20,000 acres. It's not a drop in the bucket. It's a big ranch, and he kept it in ag production for a long time. But who knows what the new buyer's going to do. And it's hard for the seller to actually know that ahead of time. And that doesn't really probably constitute a bullet, but I just wanted to, point out that this issue has importance for both the buyers and the sellers and the community. And it's a tough one. But I think the River District has always respected private property rights. And I just wanted to make sure that we didn't lose sight of that.
Absolutely. Good point. Director Alfie.
You're on mute, Tom.
I'd agree with Director Curry's remarks, but there are two different things here, and it is really, really hard. And I'm sure that the anti-speculation work group has wrestled with this problem. How do you tell if someone is speculating or just a rich individual buying up ranch land? So there's no easy solution to that. I think, though, that if we're addressing the issue of speculation, you kind of like good art, you know it when you see it, and so we just have to allow for some subjectivity there. The other point I think we should add as a bullet point is some reference to the fact that the demand management program has to be designed in a way that it does not encourage speculation.
Good additional point. Director Acquafresca.
Thank you. I agree with Director Whitmore that Director Curry's first concern that she walked us through is probably covered with the second half of that first sentence, where it goes on to say, primarily to secure financial profit, and where the purported speculator does not have a specific plan to put the water use for legitimate beneficial purposes. And in the example that you used, Director Curry, you would be putting the water to legitimate beneficial purposes. So I think you're pretty well covered there. I view this proposed new policy statement as to be one of those sideboards that we've all agreed would need to be associated with any kind of a water sharing program, whether it's demand management, as it's been talked about, or some other water sharing program. This is I believe, a necessary and important sideboard. We do want to get it right, so I'm happy we're going to take considerable time with this. And I'll commit, to going back to this first draft in the weeks ahead and really comb through it and maybe talk to some of you others and make sure we are getting it right. Because it's a difficult issue area, but it's a very necessary sideboard to any water sharing program. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else have additional comments to make? If not, I think we will just pass this one back to staff for revisions and bring it back. Is that, or I'm going to ask our general manager, or do we need to have a motion? No, we'll just
No.
pass it back to staff and they'll bring it back in July.
And I think Zane will work his magic and it'll be exactly perfect for every director when he brings it back. Because
Could I make a comment, please, President Whitmore?
Yes, sorry, Peter.
Yeah,
go
sorry.
ahead.
Thank you. Maybe I'm turned down a little bit here. I appreciate the conversation on this proposed policy. I did want to address the changes that Director Acquafresca suggested to the first sentence of the policy. And I think I understand the reason for those changes was to put sort of the emphasis on the opposition being focused where, sort of what we would have discussed numerous times in this meeting on the financial speculator, where somebody comes in without a specific plan. And I think that's fine. However, the sentence as presented and drafted in the proposed policy, I think does that, but also reaffirms the River District's historical opposition to water speculation in the more general sense. And for example, when a municipality seeks to appropriate water, maybe a trans mountain diversion, beyond its reasonable needs, the River District might get in that application and oppose that application, even though the municipality's intent is not to achieve a financial profit. The application is in part speculative because the uses claimed and the amounts claimed are far beyond the reasonable planning projection of that municipality. And for that reason, I believe it is important to maintain the sentence structure as drafted, or at least address both of those concerns. If we want to split that into two different sentences, or otherwise, I'm okay with that. But that was in part the reason behind, I believe, the way that sentence was drafted.
Okay, can I suggest, okay, I see Director Acquafresca has his hand up. I was going to suggest that we send this back to staff. Please discuss internally, and then when you bring it back, if there are some things like that that we should be aware of, let us know. Director Acquafresca.
Thank you. I believe that Peter makes a good point here on that. And my preference would be to have two separate sentences.
Okay.
Break that first sentence is kind of a run-on sentence. So let's break it into two and make sure we're getting both points across. Thanks, Peter.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to comment on that. And I guess if I could speak to the other issue that Director Curry raised about protecting the nature of private property transactions, I think we can all agree upon that. And Director Alvey is right. I'm serving on the, and some of you may also be on the anti-speculation task force, the state's anti-speculation task force, and that issue has come up a number of times. I would sort of put in a word of caution about the requested edit. I'm not necessarily opposed to it, but its placement and its structure could be important. I don't want that to be seen to swallow the whole of the policy itself. Certainly we don't want to get in the way of private property transactions. However, we do have to keep in mind that the private property of a Colorado water right is based on the right to use. It's a usufructuary right. And if we as a state decide to adopt a more stringent interpretation, or I guess it wouldn't even be more stringent, it would just be to broaden the interpretation of that to apply to existing absolute water rights, where the acquirer, the purchaser, it seeks only to have a financial profit and does not have a legitimate plan to put the water to beneficial use, then that's, that's no longer part of the way that a water right can be transacted, and it is possible that could have an impact on a otherwise a private property transfer. But I think that's simply the nature of how Colorado water rights are recognized as a usufructuary right. So I think I'm happy with the with the suggestion. I just want to point out that I think in staff, in preparing that, will exercise some caution about that suggested change.
Great point. Great point. Yes, Director Curry.
Thank you. And I guess I would ask before we move off this topic that we get in communication from the staff regarding the anti-speculation work group or task force. I'm not sure what you're calling it, Peter. If you're asked to make a decision there prior to the July meeting, and I know the time frame for that is that I think the legislation called for input from this group prior to, was it August 1st? I think that is going to bring a couple of these issues to a head. And I would just love to know how you're progressing with that, how you're feeling about whatever recommendations come out from that group. And was wondering, Madam President, if we could get just an update, at least from Peter, regarding how those recommendations are being formulated and where they're headed, since he is our person, our
Sure, no problem.
Person.
I'm going to suggest, Director Curry, that we've already given, we're not adopting this policy today. We've already given staff direction to go back and return it. Let's get an update on the speculation group. Let's do that right after project operations and updates. Okay, if we can add that to the agenda. Okay, great. Then let's move on to finishing up the general manager's report.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, board members, on that discussion. I think that's helpful. I appreciate the time and effort it takes to talk through some of those issues. Hopefully, talking about a simplified contract template is a little easier. This ties into a conversation we had yesterday. Staff is trying to find a way to streamline our internal process. I think, just to be frank, we do not want to turn into a contracting entity that resembles the Bureau of Reclamation, or for that matter, the state of Colorado. We want to be able to be fairly nimble while protecting the district's legal interests and liabilities. We have a series of administrative type contracts that we've been running into that I've become aware of since I became general manager. There are things like carpet replacement, painting, plumbing that goes on at the office that our normal contract procedures seem rather arduous for and a little bit mystifying to our contractors when we tell them we're going to have our process involve lawyers and 6-page contracts, and it makes it very hard for us to get things done quickly. So what we're recommending here is just a simplified contract form for very administrative items that also reduces the insurance requirements to a minimum of $500,000 for both general liability and auto. It's just, it goes along with that discussion that we talked about yesterday, and it's one that I think will just save some staff time and some attorney time in particular I would just note that Jason Turner does a remarkable job as our attorney who reviews and writes contracts for us. But his time is often better spent on very substantive issues, not on these simplified contract issues. The key is that I would still be responsible for reviewing these contracts, and there'd be no modifications to the form allowed. So the legal has approved the form as presented to you. And there's a series of questions we'll ask internally that will limit the scope of these contracts being applied. I think both legal staff and myself support this. I do want to thank Gracie Wright, our contract administrator, for working hard on this issue and pushing this. She was prepared to present on this, but I just wanted to move this along quickly. So I apologize. You have to talk to me and not Gracie, but she's really the motivating force here behind this. So any questions, or there's a recommended motion there in action if the board would so consider it.
Yes, Peter.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks, Andy. No problem with the recommendation or anything like that. I just want to reiterate for the record just three points. One is that the staff will develop a checklist, or has developed a checklist of the type of administrative type contracts that fit within this simplified contract form. So as Andy said, they're the more things like replacing carpet and cleaning the office and so forth. We're okay with that. We do want to reiterate there will be no legal review of these contracts, and so hopefully River District staff, and we're going to have to trust Andy, which we do, that that only those types of contracts will come through this process, because there won't be legal review to say, not that Andy would be incapable of that anyway, but say that this type of contract does not fit within the simplified, this type of service does not fit within the simplified contract form. The other thing is that with the reduced insurance rates are below the Governmental Immunity Act waiver, we're okay with that. But you should just know that, given the nature of the contracts and the type of services provided, we think that is okay, but we wanted to let you know that.
I assume that if we were doing a major construction contract, we'd get a performance bond, all those kinds of things. I think the explanation that Andy's provided on the kinds of contracts seems fairly clear. These aren't going to be, we're not rebuilding a dam with this contract.
No.
Right? Does anyone have any concerns or discussion on this? And if not, I would entertain a motion to adopt staff recommendation.
I would move that we take staff's, move staff's recommendation.
All right. Thank you, Director Hawes. Is there a second?
Monger, second.
Thank you, Director Monger. Okay, any further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
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 Any
Aye.
opposed? Nay.
Okay, the next item is the EHOP, or Employee Home Ownership Program. Ian wrote this portion of the memo. I'll just quickly summarize. I'm hoping the board has had time to read the memo. The board has been very supportive of our effort to support and attract, retain qualified employees in a competitive marketplace. And one of the tools we utilize is our Employee Home Ownership Program, first adopted by the board back in 2008. It's a really a down payment assistance program of up to $50,000 or 10% of the home purchase price, which, by the way, in Glenwood Springs is always $50,000 in terms of the minimum these days, unfortunately. It was set when it was set at the program was set at a fixed interest rate of 4%. And we believe that a fixed loan rate makes sense for the employee. But the 4% was fixed into the program guidelines. At the time it was set, that was 1 percentage point below prime. Today, 4% is, well, it's about, a 3/4 of a point above prime. But what we found with some of our newer employees is that they scoff at this program as being an incentive because the interest rate is higher at 4% than what they can get on the market. And, or they end up taking money out of their savings. And I mean, it just isn't an attractive product. So we're recommending that the board allow us to continue with a fixed interest rate, but that it's set on the day of the application from the employee, and that it be 1% below prime, with a cap on both ends, so that it will, and I just want to make sure I get it.
Not lower than 2.
Not lower than 2 and
Not more than 5.
And not more than 5, correct. So we would ask for the board's support to change those guidelines.
Seems like a reasonable request. Other comments, concerns? Yes, Director Acquafresca.
You're on mute, Steve.
Sorry. I was curious, how many employees have taken advantage of this program, say over the last couple of years?
Audrey, do you have those numbers, or Ian?
Yeah, sorry, I should have had this up. I believe that we have had, let's see.
I think there's 8 or 9, Audrey, that have used it.
Yeah, there's 11 total employees that have taken advantage of the program since its inception. In the last few years, though, we've only had 1 since 2018. And I think part of that is because of the interest rate. It has not been as an attractive program.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, any further questions? Yes, Director Beckley.
So Andy, this is a great program. I appreciate what you're doing. I think this is great for the employees. The one concern I have is if you have a cap set at 5%. I mean, what makes this nice is that it's 1% below prime. So I don't think it's going to happen in the next 5 years, but if prime goes up to 10, 11%, now we're going to come back and have to rechange this. Just a thought. I think if we set a 1% below prime is enough to keep us in the ballpark.
Well, and I hear you, Steve. I think that we could certainly do that. I would say it's up to the board's discretion. My thought on the cap, both on the 2% and the 5%, is that the discussions we've had before is that the board wanted to make sure that it got some return on its money. That would, we have significant investments that frankly today we're lucky if we're getting anything close to 0.5 point on. So and so actually on I probably shouldn't say this in front of all the employees who have these loans. We're making a lot more money as a district off of our employee home ownership loan program than we are off of the investments elsewhere. But at 5%, my thought behind that was just that it caps it as an attractive rate. I agree with you that if interest rates shoot up like they did in the late 70s, early 80s, 5% would seem exceedingly low at that point. I guess I would take direction from the board on that, certainly.
Would it be feasible for us to simply put a sunset on it where the rates would be reviewed every 2 years?
We could certainly do that.
Does that seem like it would work? Because I think Director Beckley has raised a good point, but I don't think it's the intent of staff to take advantage of the district in that fashion. So unless rates suddenly go crazy, I would think a 2-year review of the rates would be adequate. Anybody have a different thought? Okay, so we have a motion for staff recommendation on this.
So moved, Alvey.
Thank you, Director Alvey. Second?
Munger, second.
Monger seconds.
And just to be clear for the record, the motion includes the phrase at the end of the staff recommendation that rates will be reviewed by staff and board on every 2 years.
Yep.
Was that the sense of the motion and the second? Yes, it was. All those in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed? Nay.
Excellent. I greatly appreciate it. The last item on the general manager's agenda report was just a discussion, as you saw in the memo, on staff organization structure. What I just, a couple of things I want to do. We remember that this board has anticipated significant staff turnover since well before I was hired, in fact, identified in the 2017 strategic plan. And maybe as my predecessor said, and I would never say this, but we had a particularly aging fleet at the district. We are now experiencing that anticipated turnover. And so we're taking an advantage of that to try to integrate our employees a little bit better by kind of cutting the tip off the pyramid in several of our districts, so that or departments, so that we have multiple director level positions rather than one person sitting at the top of the pyramid within the district. Part of that is just the talent and skill that we have among staff. We want to make sure that we're allowing greater integration and cooperation throughout the district on at those positions. I do want to take the opportunity to introduce you. You met Amy yesterday. Amy, as you can tell, is an excellent hire. The district is really excited. I do want to introduce you to Raquel Flinker. Raquel is here. She is her prior employment was at the city of Aspen. She was an engineer in their engineering department, project manager. She has a PE and water resources. She is multilingual, and in fact, if anybody needs some help with Portuguese, please let her know.
Wow.
She's a native of Brazil, but Raquel, we couldn't pass up the opportunity to hire her when we met her. At the same time, we were looking for the project partnership funding program manager, and I want to make it clear to the board, we are sticking within current staff limits of 22 staff members. We're just shifting some folks around to make this happen. So Raquel is an excellent asset. I think you will all really enjoy working with her. She's going to be working quite a bit down in the Gunnison Basin due to the fact that DK is moving over more to focus on interstate issues. So we'll be actually arranging right now for an in-person tour down there with meeting with some of our major constituents in both the North Fork and the Uncompahgre Valley. We'll get over to Gunnison County, the main part of Gunnison County, Upper Gunnison, later this summer, I think, is the plan, or maybe in June, if I'm not mistaken. So we will be around with Raquel, and I would just encourage you, I would say normally encourage you to talk to Raquel when we take a break, but given the fact that we're on Zoom, you'll have to do it at your opportunity. She's a great hire. Just Raquel, thank you for being willing to join our team. So,
thank you.
Are there any questions about the staff reorganization that we're engaged in? I think that there are more details in my memo for anybody who's interested.
I'm not seeing any.
Doug,
Doug, Director Munger.
Sorry, Madam Chair. So thank you. So, Annie, I hate to get involved in the micromanagement, and you're doing a great job. So my comment would be somewhere out there or whatever, and I'm not into graphs and charts, but if you could provide us with some point in time with a who reports to who and who does this and that and there, that would be a good thing for us too. I know it's even in a changing mode right now. I think it's kind of, you're modifying. I'm all good with that too. So I like to be in the nimble part and being able to do what we need to do to get the job done. You guys get the job done. So, but I guess just communicate back to us as we know what's happening, so we know what we're doing.
Audrey and I are working on that org chart as we speak. The one thing we need to do is just literally fill some of the three director positions in the engineering department internally. We're in a process to do that. So that's why you don't have an org chart in the packet right now, but we will get you that. And yeah, I think it will help everybody understand where people are situated in the departments and what they're doing, right? Audrey, do you have anything to add to that?
No, and Doug, I'd be happy to send that out to the entire board as soon as we have that that finalized. The other thing, Andy, that you didn't mention that I thought is worth mentioning is we're in the process of hiring a director of public relations, as unfortunately Alicia informed us that she is intending to retire from the district sometime this summer. She will be staying on to help with the onboarding and transition of that new director. And then a subsequent hire will be public relations and media specialist, as Eleanor Hassenbeck's fellowship is ending in May. So just want to mention that as well, that those are the remaining positions from external hires, I imagine will be filling as well over the next couple months.
Great. Thank you, Audrey. Andy, anything more in your report?
Nothing else from my report. Thank you very much, Madam President.
Okay, let's move on to external affairs.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You have an external affairs write-up that includes all of our press mentions and an overview of all the work we've done since our last meeting together. I'm gonna, because we're a little behind schedule, just give you a quick overview of recent outreach efforts. Many of you attended the most recent Water With Your Lunch that was focused on state legislative and policy matters, as well as some of the massive chunks of dollars that are flying around down at the state capitol that we'll talk about during my state affairs update. We were glad to have Senator Rankin and former Representative Gail Berry on to talk about JBC and budget process at a high level, but informative, I think, to many of our constituents, as well as Representative Dylan Roberts and Senator Carrie Donovan on to talk about the work of the two agriculture committees. That was a successful, another successful webinar event that I think attracted somewhere near 180 registrants with well over 100 viewers throughout the program. We are working to finalize dates for the State of the Rivers this spring and early summer. As was highlighted in the memo, we have four. We have virtual States of the Rivers scheduled or working to schedule in the White, the Yampa, the Colorado, and the Gunnison River basins. We felt as though it was probably easiest because, that's about a month away at this point, to stick with a virtual program, but simultaneously are working with our partners in those basins and sub-basins to develop some in-person outreach events this fall. And we will, of course, keep you in the loop on that as dates and specific programming becomes available. So with that, I think that's all I needed to report on external affairs, unless the board has questions on some of our activities.
Anyone have?
Sorry, just want to mention that we are planning to continue the Water With Your Lunch series as well. So that's not going away. We don't have any calendared at the moment, but they are. We're thinking about that too.
Great.
Thanks, Eleanor.
Yes, Director Hawes.
Thank you. Just a quick question on the timing of the State of the Rivers. I know those are really valuable. I'd love to be able to tell commissioners and such when those are going to be. Do you have a sense?
Right now we're aiming for end of May, early June. None of them are set in stone. We have weeks kind of slotted right now, and I'm reaching out to speakers to try to nail those down. And as soon as we have them, I can send them out to the board or send them to somebody to send them out to you.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
On to state affairs, Madam Chair.
Yes, please.
Well, before we dive in on this, I wanted you all to know I received a call from Northern Water Conservancy District about 2 hours ago. They were calling to let us know and ask that we convey to the board that their board of directors this morning voted to approve entering into a $15 million settlement agreement with Save the Colorado over the Windy Gap firming project. Details are still coming out. Northern is expected to make a statement or a release here in about 45 minutes. I was just, as you may have seen on my internet tab, scrolling Twitter to try and find out what Gary Walkner was saying. I don't have a lot for you there other than we do know it's a $15 million settlement, and that details will be coming out soon. Of course, our hope is that some of those dollars will go towards completion of the Colorado River Connectivity Channel. We will keep you in the loop as we learn more on that issue.
Great.
State affairs. I was able to drive down to Denver and testify in front of the House Agriculture Committee on Monday for the first time in 14 or more months. It was very nice to be down there in person with legislators, and I hope to be there more often during the second half of the legislative session. I specifically testified on the general fund transfer to implementation of the state water plan and to the water supply reserve fund, House Bill 1260. I should note for the board that not only in my testimony, but in the testimony of many other witnesses and the comments of legislators, the district's successful 7A measure was highlighted as an example of where different regions in the state, specifically the West Slope here, are taking the lead. And I think the legislators saw that as encouragement to continue, not only in passing this $20 million stimulus appropriation, but trying to find additional ways to increase appropriations to both WSRF and the Water Plan Implementation Fund. So I think by leading by example, we are helping to set a tone and a direction at the state capitol as it relates to funding issues. I also testified on 1261, House Bill 1261, Representative Catlin's bill to extend the beetle kill wood products sales tax exemption. So moving quickly, we have 3 bills to consider today, but did want to touch on the note that I sent to you in my legislative update on Monday evening about CDPHE's draft bill, which proposes to establish a state dredge and fill permit program to address these gap waters that are the state has expressed concerns about related to, well, the gap between what was protected under the Obama rule and previous guidance and the new Trump administration rule. We have been in conversations with the state, specifically the Department of Agriculture and the governor's office have been receptive to our thoughts and input. And we have thus far just made clear to them that if they are to move forward on something, we do need a fully defined and durable agricultural exemption. We have made sure to be clear with them that our input and suggestions related to an ag exemption do not guarantee any position from this board on a bill if and when a bill is introduced. And with that said, I would say it does appear that the state is having some, seeing some challenges finding a sponsor for this bill. Former Representative Arndt, the then chair of the Agriculture Committee, declined to sponsor the legislation, and as did Dylan Roberts, a West Slope representative on the Ag Committee in the House as well. We are hearing concerns about the state's proposal from a number of different water users and legislators down there. The path forward on this is still very unclear, which is why I don't recommend any sort of action on the draft at this point. Also because it's a draft and we're likely to see many changes before it would be appropriate for us to take a position. So with that, I'm happy to dive into the 3 bills I have in front of you today for your position.
Great, please.
House Bill 1268 is nearly identical to a bill the board supported last year. And last year's bill was just a continued effort by the General Assembly to try and incentivize studies and development of feasibility studies and pilot deployments related to blockchain, in situ sensors and emerging technologies related to their potential benefits for water management in the state. we did support this bill last year that included language related to water trading. I think since that time and now, we've seen a number of concerns related to how water trading could be used to negatively impact West Slope water users. My recommendation to this board is to advise staff to try and amend and more narrowly define what water trading is in the statute. This bill does not have a definition for it. It's not defined in the underlying statute so far as I can see. And so that was just one flag point, but given that the board did support this bill last year, it is largely an appropriation of matching dollars. The two universities, University of Colorado and Colorado State, are required to collaborate with the Water Institute to go out and try and raise at least double the appropriation before they can begin work. Those matching funds can be received through grants or donations and must be received before June 1st of 2022. With that, my recommendation is to amend to more narrowly define or potentially strike the water trading language in the statute. And with that, with that amendment in hand, I would be comfortable recommending a position of support on this bill.
Questions or comments for Zane? Is there a motion for staff to adopt staff recommendation?
I'm sorry, I have a question.
All right, Director Hawes.
Just a quick question on the amendment. I mean, I absolutely can see supporting this bill. And I understand the concerns. What do you think an amendment's likely, or is like if we don't get that amendment, will you just bring it back to the board for an additional conversation? How would we proceed?
I'm happy to do that. We will have ample time between now and our next legislative call in 2 weeks from tomorrow to have conversations with a potential Senate sponsor. There is no Senate sponsor at this point, so I think a conversation with the chair, Carrie Donovan, is appropriate at this point, and we'd be happy to work with her. And if we're unsuccessful, of course, bring that back to you for a position.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for not asking me to define blockchain, Director Haas.
That was next.
Okay, anyone else have a comment, or does someone want to move staff recommendation?
Yeah, this is Munger. I move that we approve staff recommendation support if amended.
Moved. Is there a second? Second, Hawes. All those in favor, aye.
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 Opposed, nay. Okay.
Thank you, directors. The next bill is Senate Bill 240. This is the second tranche of stimulus dollars headed towards CWCB, $15 million from the general fund to the CWCB construction fund for use by the CWCB to protect watersheds against the impacts of wildfires through the existing watershed restoration grant program. Also within here is a provision for the CWCB to conduct a statewide watershed analysis to investigate the susceptibility of life, safety, infrastructure, and water supplies to wildfire impacts. CWCB, as you can see in my write-up, can use up to 5% of the money to administer the grant program, up to 10% to provide technical engineering services to grantees. And they must spend at least 10 million. I think it's within 15 months from now, and award the remaining money minus CWCB uses to administer the grant program and technical services prior to just end of year 2022. My recommendation here is to support this bill.
Questions? Comments? Motion to approve staff recommendation.
I'll move staff recommendation.
Director Hawes, is there a second? Second, Elvie. Any more discussion? Director Hawes.
Thank you. I do have a question. Can some of this money be used for some of the projects that were described in the East Troublesome Fire that we don't have funding for?
My understanding is yes, without having a more detailed understanding of the funding requirements within the existing grant program, but my understanding is yes. And in fact,
Okay, 'cause
I apologize, Director Hawes. There is one thing I forgot to flag for you. We are likely to see an amendment next week to try and double the appropriation, as well as to lessen the matching requirement for some of these dollars within the grant program, similar to the amendments we're likely to see on the water plan implementation cash fund. Those, although we don't have amendments in hand, we don't have anything on bill paper yet. Those amendments are I think the nature of those amendments is to try and get these dollars out to projects on the ground as soon as possible.
great.
All right. All those in favor, aye.
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 Opposed, nay. Great.
Thank you.
Zane?
Our last bill, which I do not have a recommended position on, my recommendation is no position. Of course, it is the pleasure of the board to advise staff how to move on this or any bill. Senate Bill 87 is the controversial agricultural workers' rights bill that we discussed a little less than 2 weeks ago on our last legislative call. This bill, I provided the official summary in my email to you, but as I see it, it kind of has three primary components. The first is agricultural worker rights and protections, allows ag workers the right to organize and join laborers, engage in collective bargaining. It also provides ag workers an entitlement to have meal breaks and rest periods, as well as one that actually has been more controversial than some of these other provisions in this section is the right to have visitors at employee-provided housing. For a variety of reasons, there's concerns, I think. There have been concerns expressed by the opponents to this bill with that provision. Ag workers are currently exempt from state and local wage laws and overtime pay. This bill removes that exemption and requires that wages be adjusted annually for cost of living and that overtime pay be established. It also has employer requirements that require agricultural employers to provide access and transportation to key service providers, provide overwork and health protections, and increased protection and safety precautions. And then lastly, less controversial, I think, at least based on the conversations I've had, is an agricultural work advisory committee. Creates a committee to analyze agricultural worker wages and conditions and write an annual report with findings and recommendations to the General Assembly. This bill did pass out of Senate Business and Labor. One question that's been raised often at the Capitol is why this didn't go to the Ag Committee. The answer that I've received there is that Business and Labor Committee is the committee of reference for the Colorado Department of Labor and Employment. Last thing to note is as I told you in my email, the Department of Agriculture has testified that they cannot support this bill as it's currently written. While I'm not privy to the detailed conversations of negotiations between proponents and opponents, it does sound like the Department of Ag is working to try and bring both sides to a common middle ground on some provisions and potentially striking some of the more controversial provisions. With that in mind, I would just note that we will know more in the next week to 10 days about the outcome of those negotiations. The River District is not engaged in those, and so I'm acting more in a reporting capacity to you on what I'm hearing. My recommended position here, because of lack of a direct water statutory or legislative connection, is no position, but I'm happy to participate in a conversation with the board on that.
Zane, I think you probably heard earlier in the comments that this particular bill actually is very troublesome to many people. And so with that, I'm going to call on Director Alfie.
Yes.
Thank you, President Whitmore. So Zane and I have talked, I've explained some of my concerns. It's really a burdensome bill for agriculture. That's just more regulation. The wage issue, it just lacks understanding of the actuality of farming, and particularly harvest time, overtime hours, those sorts of things. We could go on for a long discussion. I guess my feeling is I'm happy enough if the River District just monitors this. I understand that it's not directly water related, although in our policy statements that we've just considered on agricultural water use, we note that it's important not to have legislation that makes it harder to farm, not exactly in those terms, but that's the thought. I guess I'm sensitive to the fact that taking a position on this may not be strategically very wise for the River District, and I'm certainly not adamant that the River District take a position. I raised the issue because I'm hearing about it from a lot of the farm interests that I represent in Delta County. But again, if the staff's sense is that we either wouldn't have much effect or that it wouldn't be strategically wise to jump into this, I'm fine with monitoring. That would be my recommendation at this point.
Okay, Director Aquafresca.
Thank you. Well, I support you on that, Tom. But I've also been hearing from producers here in Mesa County that these provisions, these proposals have the potential to make farming non-economic, particularly in the fresh produce business, in the orchard and vineyard industries, where hand labor is such a big part of their overhead. I'm happy to wait and see what changes the Department of Agriculture is able to achieve. But I believe it would be important for us to come back after that time and revisit this because I believe there is a pretty direct nexus between the ability of farmers to succeed economically, financially, and their ability to put their water rights to beneficial use. There are some producers that have flat out told me, if this were to go into law, they're going to find a way out of the business. And that does not necessarily mean that somebody else is going to pick up that business and continue with it if it's been determined that it's no longer economic. So I'm not settled on whether or not this board should take a position, but I'm happy to wait and see how the bill evolves, and hopefully it will be a less onerous piece of legislation going down the road.
Thank you, Director Aquafresca. I echo those concerns raised by both Directors Alvey and Aquafresca. Here would be my suggestion. It appears as though this will not be our last opportunity to take a position on this. Would it be acceptable to everyone to not take a position until our next regular legislative special meeting? If for any reason before our next scheduled meeting, it becomes clear that this legislation is moving ahead at very quick speed, we could call an additional special meeting to discuss legislation. But that would give Zane the opportunity to kind of see what happens with it without us officially being in the fray and yet not letting it move forward until we've had an opportunity to take a position. Does that?
That works perfectly for me. And I will add that as I'm in regular conversations with our West Slope delegation and others, I feel more than comfortable expressing many of the clear concerns that I've heard from individual board members in those conversations.
Director Monger, you had your hand up.
Yeah, so I guess it seems like a position of monitor. I don't know that I like the position of no position. So I guess monitor, that way it kind of keeps it a little bit more on our radar screen. So.
All right, so
Madam
I take
Chair,
that as you move to
motion,
monitor.
yeah. Yes, please. Thank you.
Second,
Second, Aquafresh.
great. Moved and seconded that we direct staff to monitor this, and I think with the direction to bring it back as soon as there's more information.
Great.
All those in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed? Nay. All right, position of monitor.
Thank you, Director. That was my last bill. A good segue from state affairs to federal affairs is that the State General Assembly right now is focused largely on how in the heck they're going to get nearly $4 billion out the door, with the federal dollars coming our way from the most recent federal stimulus plan. It does look like right now that legislators are going to have a role in directing those dollars and where those dollars go. We are engaged in conversations with JBC members and others on specifically ways to fund important projects on the Western Slope, like the Colorado River Connectivity Channel, ways to get a multi-year funding deal for WSRF out of those dollars. Those dollars, we're still waiting on some guidance from the feds on how they can be spent, but we do know that the timeline for spending them is much longer than the timelines attached to some of these state excess general fund revenue stimulus dollars that we've been discussing over the last couple of weeks. We will keep the board in the loop on that. And unless there are questions on state affairs, I'm happy to move quickly into federal affairs.
Yeah, let's move quickly into federal affairs.
The highlights here are infrastructure turned from a week to a month, and now it looks like it's going to be infrastructure year. So we are well positioned, as I highlighted in my memo, with key committee assignments. Both Senators Bennett and Hickenlooper are on key committees related to our interests on the West Slope, water and natural resource issues more broadly. Congresswoman Boebert was also appointed to the House Natural Resource Committee subcommittee on water, oceans, and wildlife, a key subcommittee for our interests. Infrastructure, as I said, really is kind of on the front burner. We're seeing a lot of bills being introduced and circulated, including a bill by Senator Bennett yesterday, the Outdoor Restoration Partnership Act, that would try to steer some of these infrastructure dollars and the federal spending that's occurring towards forestry and watershed improvement projects, really tied into the civilian or climate conservation corps proposals that are also flying around. I think there's no shortage or no fewer than 7 or 8 different bills that touch on those kinds of outdoor restoration, job creation tones. So we're tracking those bills closely. It's unclear what final shape they will take. Beyond that, we're engaging with our West-wide and nationwide organizations to make sure that our delegation and the delegations throughout the American West are pushing for Western water infrastructure dollars within any infrastructure proposal or plan that comes forward on bill paper. Family Farm Alliance, NWRA, Water Congress, Federal Affairs have all been very helpful, and we're acting. We're active in those conversations with them. Beyond that, your federal affairs memo has an overview of some of those COVID relief dollars that have been put out, the $4.9 billion that's coming to the state, and a couple of just key other water bills on the legislative radar. At the risk of taking too much more of your time today, I'm happy to take some questions.
Questions for Zane? Hopefully everybody's read the memo, but please feel free to ask questions if you have them. Okay, there's a lot going on at the federal level too. So I'm not seeing any questions, Zane. So
that means
anything else?
That's all I've got for now. So I'm happy to engage in individual conversations with the board members. It does look like Director Aquafresca may have his hand up.
Sorry, Director Aquafresca, I missed you.
Thank you. Zane, just a quick question. Do you believe that the concept of renewing the old conservation corps might be a source of help for river managers to begin to tackle invasive species up and down the Colorado River and get them replaced with desirable species?
I think it's certainly within the realm of possibilities. I would note that the conversations surrounding those are more related to watershed health and wildfire fuels treatment and risk mitigation related to wildfire. I think that kind of package we will likely see included in some sort of infrastructure package, whether it's a compromise with the Republicans to the tune of $800 billion like we saw yesterday, or whether it's the larger, more massive proposal put forward by the Biden administration. I think there is room to address some of those efforts, Director Aquafresca, but the tenor of the conversation with those programs specifically has been more aimed at wildfire in the West.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else have a question for Zane on anything in the federal affairs arena? All righty.
Last note, we are engaging regularly with our congressional staff and members. We've had telephone calls or in-person meetings with Representative Boebert, Senators Hickenlooper and Bennett on multiple occasions, and their staff on multiple occasions since we last met. So we'll continue to do that. And Andy, I don't know if you have something to add, but I'll shut up and get off the screen.
I just wanted to reiterate that I feel like the district has been very effective in these infrastructure conversations. Zane kind of downplays our role in it, but frankly, the funding at the state, Zane and I both were engaged in very high level discussions on getting that 20 million out through the state. We appreciate the board supporting that. The additional federal funding and the emphasis on infrastructure to include water and watershed health issues is something that we have been, I think, extremely effective in communicating to our senators and our congresswomen, and all have been very receptive and supportive. So it's really, I think Zane is doing an excellent job, and I'm playing his backup. So he brings me in when he needs me. So it's really a good operation. And I think the board should be aware that that's going on behind the scenes to do everything we can to help these funds come in to supplement our partnership project funding program. So just want to let you know.
Great, thank you. And I think we all appreciate those efforts. That's one of the major responsibilities that the district has in fulfilling its mission, is to affect federal issues. Okay, so we are now at project operations and updates.
Hunter Causey, if you could go ahead and run with it, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, directors. So you may recall in 2020, staff implemented a comprehensive dam safety evaluation of Richard Dam. That culminated in a report that included a number of recommendations to reduce uncertainty and increase public safety. Staff has been working on those recommendations since that report came out, but some of those recommendations do warrant outside consulting services for instrumentation, field exploration, some geotechnical and engineering analyses. Staff distributed RFP based on those recommendations. We received 2 proposals and are recommending HDR Engineering Inc.'s proposal. So this is a request for authorization to enter into a contract with HDR Engineering Inc. if the board would consider it.
Thank you very much, Hunter. And your memo explained all of it in good detail. Are there questions for Hunter? If not, I would entertain a motion to approve staff's recommendation. Director Munger.
Yeah, so I have a short question and then I'm,
Sure.
so is our partners in Denver okay with this? Did we run this by them as well? And with that, since I have the floor, I'd move that we approve staff's recommendation, but I'd like to hear the response.
Yes, Denver Water has been involved. They helped us put together the RFP. They've been up to speed the whole time.
And
Okay.
I'll second the motion.
Thank you, Director Chandler Henry. It's been moved and seconded to approve the contract with HDR for consulting on Wolford Mountain Reservoir. Any further discussion? All those in favor, aye.
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 Opposed, nay. Okay. Hunter, are you also addressing Elkhead Reservoir updates?
In the interest of time, no, I'll just stick with that one request.
But there was information in the packet.
We actually do not
Was
have.
it? We didn't have, no, you're right, but there wasn't.
Not aside from the hydrology information. Yeah.
Okay. Anyone have any questions for Hunter about Elkhead? All right. Then that brings us to Peter. Do you want to talk about the anti-speculation task force and give us a short update in response to Director Curry's request?
Yes, I'm sure happy to do that. The anti-speculation task force has been meeting periodically, of course, by Zoom and by drafting subcommittees. I'm on the legal committee on that. And a revision was submitted by the state, I believe, at the end of last week. There's a meeting on Friday of this week. The state requested that revised document not be distributed at this time. I think simply because it's still just draft work in progress. I don't think there's anything ultra secret about any of it, but the work product is draft. In January, I had reported to the board on my general approach to the anti-speculation task force, and I included a draft of the legal committee's draft report, probably prematurely. So I probably should not have done that, but and in fact, it has been revised since I did that. But the basic tack that I have been taking and asked in January and would ask, again, and for the board to let me know if they have any concerns, is to focus on the balance of the protection of water rights as a vested property right that is based on the beneficial use of water versus discouraging speculation in water rights for a pure profit motive, especially when the potential future profit motive can be realized through the non-use of the water. In other words, demand management might be such a circumstance if there's a speculative aspect to that. And the reason for that is because, at least under the current state of the law, that the acquisition of an absolute water right with the intent to achieve a financial reward from that acquisition by means of not using the water right and not changing the use of the water right has no means to go through water court. Whereas under today's state of the law, if you acquire water right, even if it's for speculative purposes and you intend to use it for you acquire an agricultural irrigation right and change it for municipal purposes, you have to go to water court to change it to municipal purposes. And the court and the objectors, other water users, whoever can come in and test whether your intent is speculative or not. In fact, that happened in a case called the High Plains case, which was a water right transfer, proposed water right transfer in the Arkansas Valley. But under the current state of the law, there is no means to test whether the purchaser has a speculative intent if the end quote unquote use, the end means to achieve the financial reward is based on the non-use of that water. That's not to say that I'm not focusing on other aspects of speculation in this process, and that the group is not. They are. It's just that that has been a key focus because obviously based on comments we've heard today and past meetings and press, and that is a heightened area of interest. So that's sort of the tact I'm taking. I think the next several meetings of the work group will be interesting. They are open to the public. I don't know if the schedule is published on the state engineer's website or not. I know that Director Curry has sat in on a couple of those. I believe some of our, a number of our constituents, including a number of our constituents that are also on our demand management stakeholder group process, sit on both of those task force, if you will. But the next few meetings I think will be interesting because people are going to start talking about recommendations. And currently I don't have any specific recommendations. I'd be happy to carry some to the board, but I will be reporting back to the board on obviously what recommendations the group is talking about.
Peter, thank you very much. Director Curry, did you have some additional questions for Peter?
No, I appreciate the update. Thank you.
Does anyone see, we did not, as you know, adopt the policy on speculation today. Does anyone have a concern with the direction that Peter's taking pending completion of that policy? Or are we all good with it? Any other comments, questions, anything? If not, I assume that was a complete and sufficient report. Director Acquafresca.
Thank you. Well, I've tried to keep the board and Peter updated on current events regarding agricultural property acquisition down here in Mesa County. And I would reiterate the news that I shared yesterday that a company known as a Wall Street hedge fund continues to be active in purchasing properties here in Mesa County. A recent purchase has been identified that's occurred in the early part of this year. So they're moving forward with some sort of an agenda. And I wanted to add to that, that it also now appears that property is being purchased by this Wall Street investor under different names, under a variety of names. And of course, we can only guess why. Perhaps it's to obscure these types of activities. I don't know. But I wanted to make sure Peter had that observation on hand so that he could assimilate that into his work on the committee.
Thank you.
Great. Peter, any other thoughts or?
No, I don't have any other thoughts at this time. I'd welcome further board input. If anybody has questions, feel free to shoot me an email or call.
Perhaps we could do another update on this.
Yes.
In July. Okay.
Will do.
Thank you. All righty. We're down to future meetings. They're on the agenda, so we're not going to talk about those other than Andy. You want to talk at all about where we are on the Lower Basin trip?
Yeah, I wanted to mention that, my preferred, from talking to the board previously, the preferred timeframe for that tour and fact-finding mission would be in November, just because of the downtime for some of our agricultural members and the just the ability to get things done down there. I will tell you, I'm a little concerned right now, even in November, about the openness of some of our lower basin partners in their ability to welcome us in person. We've been informed by a number of folks, larger organizations, that have actually been telling their employees that they're not coming back until into 2022 due to the pandemic. I guess I would like to know from the board, the other alternative would be to schedule it a few months later in February, later February, hopefully before calving season kicks in for some of our ag members. Is that a doable, is there a great discussed with a February tour, or would that work for folks? We do need to start trying to schedule that and get it moving. But I'm just concerned that right now, November seems to be potentially troubling. And so hopefully people are just being a little too conservative, but I want you to think about it. So.
I mean, November works from my perspective. I think, my perspective on it is anyone who wants to be vaccinated has been vaccinated. The intent here was to flatten the curve, as I understood it, not to eradicate this as we have with smallpox. And so I'm sort of puzzled why, in April people are still hesitant to do something in November. However, if they are, they are. February would work fine, I think. We can only do what we can do, but goodness.
Yeah. No.
Director Hawes.
Yeah, thanks. I tend to lean towards February just because there is so much uncertainty still, and it's not just COVID. It's negotiations, it's conversations. We may have CRUA, which it's starting to look like, and I'm on that committee, and it looks like we're having our first meeting to start planning. I just think plans are hard right now, and giving yourself 3 more months probably isn't a bad thing, just to kind of start to see how things actually unfold. And I don't think it hurts to go 3 months later in terms of information and lessons we'd learned.
Thank you.
I would just suggest try not to hit a weekend because it's also ski season.
We'll try to get you back in time on a Friday afternoon.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Director Curry.
Thank you. And I'm probably one of those that really does need a tour, but I actually need one of the upper Colorado basin at some point, even if we just sit down and look at a map, Andy, so that I understand the complexities of the protocols and the releases and all the stuff going on. But I couldn't do anything in February because of the General Assembly being in session. So
that's a good point.
Yes, Director Aquafresca.
Thank you. Andy, I had a county commissioner tell me that he wants to get in on a tour of the Big Thompson project. And I don't know if Northern does those routinely, or if they may have tours related to the connectivity project. But I think when a commissioner wants to know more about the system and the threats, we should try to accommodate him. And I'm going to try to set him up to tour our local Mesa County infrastructure as well.
Great. Steve, we do occasionally, we have worked with Northern to set up those tours in the past. I think many of us have been on those. I don't think, again, they have anything planned right now. Some of the hesitancy in my voice is just because it's a Bureau facility. The Bureau's got some limitations, COVID pandemic related limitations, but we'll keep that in mind for Commissioner Davis. I assume that's who we're talking about, and we'll certainly
correct.
Keep that, keep him in mind. And that Northern does a very good job of running a tour on their system, and we'll certainly let them know that we have some interest in that as soon as they're able to. So
thank you.
All righty. Thank you, everyone. It's been a long meeting. We've covered a lot of important material. Yes, Director Munger.
I'm sorry, Madam Chairman. So I just real quickly at our next meeting or something, I'd sure like to have an update from whoever's handling the fire mitigation concept. So if you could add that to our agenda, maybe some kind of update or something, because of what our participation is on that fire mitigation as well in the Grand County scheme. So I just wanted to say that. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So Andy, you've got a lot of things that we've asked to put on the July agenda, and we will be meeting in person in Glenwood Springs, I'm confident. So, so we'll see you all in July, and in the meantime, we'll be talking again in 2 weeks, if not before then, saying if anything critical comes up. Of course, we'll always call a special meeting, but otherwise we will be talking 2 weeks from tomorrow. Thank you to staff, excellent presentations, excellent memos and packet. And thank you, everyone. Good discussions, really appreciate it. And the meeting is now adjourned.
Thank you. Great.